The backyard of King Huai's residence was in full bloom. Butterflies fluttered gracefully, chasing and playing. The air was filled with a garden's fragrance. A veiled consort carried a bamboo basket, trailing her long skirt as she moved through the flowers. She bent to pick a flower and sniffed it, her delicate eyes curved in delight. Just then, a lightly armored Chu Shanglong entered the garden. His armor clinked as he walked. He stopped. Maintaining a respectful distance, he said, "His Majesty has decreed, in 3 days, the consort is to join the investigation team to Beijing. Please prepare in advance." The consort's soft expression turned cold. She replied indifferently, "Is there anything else? If not, leave." Chu Shanglong bowed and left. After he was out of sight, the consort's face grew dark. Her earlier cheer vanished in an instant. Elsewhere, upon learning that he would depart for Beijing in 3 days, Suchan rode his mare home. He found Li Miaozhen meditating, and said, "Could you accompany me to Yunlu Academy?" Li Miaozhen coldly refused. "I'm not going." Suchan coaxed. "But it's important. Remember that case you discovered? The bloody trail spanning 3,000 miles. The court has assigned me as the lead officer. In 3 days, I'll lead the delegation to Beijing to thoroughly investigate." Li Miaozhen's spirits lifted immediately. "Excellent. I'll join you." Suchan sighed helplessly. A saintess of the celestial sect, so eager for results. "I wonder if this is karmic retribution." He mused. "The court has its rules. You, as a civilian, cannot participate in this case. How about this? You go ahead. We'll meet in Beijing. Contact the Inspector General. He'll speak to Li Miaozhen. No need to formally invite her. With her hatred of evil, she'll insist on joining herself. Having a 4th-grade Taoist helping in the shadows would greatly increase the chances of solving the case." Li Miaozhen said, "I have one more request. When you're investigating, I want to be by your side. If I'm not present for any reason, I'll need you to explain the process and your reasoning afterward." Suchan gave her a puzzled look. She wants to learn investigation techniques. Fair enough. She'll need those skills for her future missions of upholding justice, eliminating evil, and ensuring fairness. No wonder she's eager to pick up some reasoning and investigative techniques. Suchan agreed to her request. "All right, one more thing. When you use the communication shard to contact me, make sure Taoist Golden Lotus blocks others from listening." The celestial sect saintess rolled her eyes. They immediately left the city, one riding on horseback, the other flying on a sword. When they reached Qingyun Mountain, Suchan paid his respects to the 3 great scholars. With an awkward expression, he said, "Lately I've been suffering from writer's block. I can't come up with anything good. Please forgive me, teachers." The 3 great scholars, seated in their Confucian robes, calmly regarded him. "It's fine. What's the matter?" Suchan coughed lightly. "And thick-skinned," he said. "The spellbooks gifted by the Li and Zhang families are mostly used up. Could you help me carve a Taoist spirit communication spell?" Li Mubai remarked. "Lately you seem blocked." Zhang Shenghan mentioned he felt unwell. Chen Tai nodded, saying he was mentally exhausted. Inwardly, Suchan sighed. People willing to be used for free must have been fallen angels in their past lives. These 3 clearly are not. He immediately requested, "Could the 3 of you help me out? Teach me the Taoist spirit communication spell." The 3 scholars hesitated. Because Taoist spells are rare, Li Miaozhen grumbled. But the spirit communication spell requires a formation. Li Mubai simply said, "Just go ahead and cast it. Leave the rest to us." Hearing this, Li Miaozhen understood. The reason Suchan brought her to the academy was to carve Taoist spells into the materials. Without hesitation, she retrieved the materials from her fragment of the earth book and set up an array. She then cast a Taoist spell. Suddenly, a chilling wind arose, as though spring had turned to deep winter. However, the spirit summoning formation did not summon any spirits, which was to be expected. In the presence of overwhelming righteousness, no ghosts or evil spirits could exist. Li Mubai began to write in the book, each stroke emitting a golden glow. Suchan nodded, marveling at how the Confucian system seemed so overpowered, as though simply reading the book allowed one to remember its contents, and writing it down could transfer that knowledge to paper. Li Mubai said, "I've written you a few more spells. Confucian magic's aftereffects are severe. I'm sure you know this well. Don't use them unless absolutely necessary." Gratefully, Suchan accepted the book. Then he asked a question that had puzzled him for a long time. "I don't understand. How do you teachers avoid the backlash?" "The backlash of Confucian magic is severe. If great scholars couldn't avoid it, they wouldn't be able to endure in the long run." In response, Zhang Shengshao explained, 4th-grade Confucians are called Junzi, gentlemen. Junzi cultivate righteous energy, which repels all evil. Suchan felt a bit regretful. He had chosen the martial path. Righteous energy repelling all evil? Does that mean reaching the level of Junzi would allow one to reflect or negate magical backlash? That's almost too good to be true. Chen Tai added, "If the spell is directed at someone else, the target would bear the backlash instead." Suchan's pupils contracted. He was glad he hadn't tested this recklessly. At his waist hung a magical artifact, a reminder of how serious the spell backlash could be. It could feel like shrinking into the wind, or as though iron wires wrapped around his waist, or even worse. He joked to himself that, just like that, Erlang's value had plummeted in his eyes, no longer of any use. Bidding farewell to the three great scholars, he and Li Miaozhen left Yunlu Academy. Walking down the steps toward the foot of the mountain, Li Miaozhen praised the Confucian system, remarking that it was indeed remarkable. In addition to magical speech, it also possessed an unyielding righteous energy, similar to Taoist golden cores. Moreover, it could record spells from other systems. She imagined how, at its peak, the Confucian school must have been extraordinarily powerful. All else is lowly. Only scholars are esteemed. She mused. Now I understand. Suddenly, a voice came from ahead. Indeed, it's a pity. Ahead stood an unkempt old man, dressed in worn-out Confucian robes, with disheveled hair. His bright eyes reflected both clarity and worldly weariness. Li Miaozhen was taken aback. This was the headmaster of Yunlu Academy, the current foremost Confucian scholar, Zhao Shou. With a gentle smile, he remarked, "You're headed to Beijing." Suchan nodded. "Yes, to investigate a case." Zhao Shou inquired further. "Aren't you afraid of offending the northern king, Suchan?" Shenghan jokingly replied, terrified, "But I still want to see what's going on." Zhao Shou stared at him for a few silent seconds. "Not a disgrace to the great fortune upon you, Suchan. Remember this, the essence of fortune is people. At least for the fortune you carry, it is the people who have gathered this fortune. It is the masses who have forged it." Suchan quickly glanced at Li Miaozhen, thinking, is it really okay to talk about this in front of Miaozhen? Yet the next moment, he noticed her face was as placid as ever, as though she hadn't heard a word. Could the headmaster have blocked her hearing? He wondered. Lost in thought, he suddenly saw Zhao Shou wave his sleeve. A book flew out, suspended in front of him. "This is a record of various magical systems I gathered during my travels in my younger days. I no longer need it." Overjoyed, Suchan accepted the book. Before he could even express his gratitude, Dean Zhao Shou had disappeared. 3 days later, at the dock in the capital, the northern-bound delegation arrived and boarded the official vessel. The delegation consisted of 200 people, led by Suchan and Yang Yin. They were accompanied by 4 silver guards, 8 bronze guards, 1 chief detective from the Ministry of Justice, and 12 constables. The inspectorate sent 2 censors and 10 guards. The Court of Judicial Review assigned 1 officer and several guards, as well as 12 attendants. Additionally, a 100-strong army unit. This was a typical configuration for a provincial governor's. Only moments ago, Suchan discovered that Chu Shanglong was also part of the delegation, heading to Beijing as well. Originally, Brother Chun, Song Tingfeng, and Zhu Guangxiao had wanted to travel north with him, but he had refused. This journey north might not necessarily encounter major crises, but if it did, it would be perilous. Suchan didn't want those 3 to get involved. After all, in the night watcher's office, those 3 were his closest friends. At the dock, the entire Su family came to see off their eldest son. Additionally, the Azure Mountain swordsman Chu Yuancheng quietly handed him a token. "This is from the national master. I'm asked to give it to you." Suchan accepted it, puzzled. "But I'm not familiar with the national master. Why would they send me this?" Monk Hung Yuan joined his hands in prayer and said, "Lord Su, may you return safely." Li Miaozhen looked at him intently, her voice clear and bright. "Do good deeds. Ask no questions about the future." She then sent him a private message. "I'll go ahead. Wait for me in Beijing." Suchan smiled and replied aloud, "Do good deeds. Ask no questions about the future." "Well said." He then privately responded, "See you up north." With that, he boarded the ship and set sail. Amid tearful farewells, the ship moved forward slowly. Suchan stood on the. As his eyes scanned the crowd, he spotted 4 familiar figures in the distance. Yang Qianhuan glaring at him with the back of his head, Chu Kaiwei calling out, Zhongli silently waving goodbye, and the northern border girl who loved to eat. Half worried, half amused, Suchan mused. Zhongli came too. "I feel like the crises she'll encounter on the way back from the dock could be more dangerous than all I'll face heading north." Yang Qianhuan, he thought, "Please make sure you send her home safely." Suchan remained on the deck, watching the ships slowly sail away. It reminded him of last year. Another journey beyond the city gates. Back then, it was to Yunzhou. Now it's to Beijing. Song Tingfeng and Zhu Guangxiao weren't there. Without Song's usual banter, this trip felt less lively. As he sighed quietly, he caught a glimpse out of the corner of his eye. A familiar figure in a brown dress, dressed as a sickly woman, stepped onto the deck. She appeared to be around 30 to 35 years old, with ordinary looks, yet a hint of arrogance in her demeanor. They noticed each other at almost the same time. Suchan's expression instantly turned sour. He couldn't resist teasing her. "Auntie, what are you doing here?" The woman's face twitched slightly. With a cold snort, she snapped, "What a coincidence." Gritting her teeth, she muttered, "I should have known." With your investigative skills, how could they not send you to a case like this? With a stern look, she warned, don't call me auntie again. Who's your superior? Who's the lead officer in this delegation? If you dare call me auntie again, I'll have them deal with you. Suchan wasn't intimidated. He started shouting at the top of his lungs. Auntie, the woman was furious. She huffed with anger, chest heaving, and shot him a fierce glare. Throwing out a harsh remark, she stormed off in a huff. Just you wait. The young attendant named Fong Si leaned closer, whispering cautiously, Lord Su, are you going to bend the rules again? Fu Xiang froze, tilting her head and looking at the maid with surprise. How did you know? The maid, known for her clever tongue, replied, you've been up till the third watch. Normally, you wouldn't be so late. You're always considerate toward the lady of the house. Fu Xiang chuckled. You cheeky girl, daring even to mock me. But as they laughed, the maid suddenly gasped, her expression turning odd. Miss, you've got a white hair. Fu Xiang's smile slowly faded. Just pluck it out, no big deal, she said coolly. After finishing her makeup, she dismissed the maid and sat alone before the mirror, staring at her own charming reflection in silence. Elsewhere on the boat, a woman pushed open Chu Shanglong's door. With hands on her hips, she exclaimed angrily, someone at the night watcher's office upset me. Chu Shanglong, who was meditating to heal internal injuries, asked calmly, who? The woman didn't show her emotions, instead stating clearly, Silver Guard Suchan, he offended me, but you don't have to go overboard. It's not a big deal. A minor warning will suffice. After saying this, she noticed Chu Shanglong didn't respond. Instead, his brows furrowed deeply. She chuckled coldly. Why aren't you answering? Even if I go to Beijing, I'll still be a consort. Chu Shanglong shook his head. You misunderstood. That man is the lead officer for this trip north. The consort's mouth dropped open slightly, her gaze momentarily blank. Chu Shanglong continued, but don't worry, he won't be riding high for long. I'll handle him. Even if he's the emperor's chosen lead officer, it's just a temporary position. A silver guard is still just a silver guard. Even if he's granted a viscount's rank, still, he was just a minor figure. This statement wasn't an exaggeration. As a commanding officer with real authority, the deputy general under the northern king, Chu Shanglong truly didn't see most noble officials as equals. The consort, upon hearing this, was furious. But there was nothing she could do about that dog. After all, he was the lead officer. No one on this ship could challenge him. Spring brought abundant rainfall. The river was swift. Unlike the calm waters of winter, occasionally, gusty winds would send large waves crashing. For those staying in the cabins, it was uncomfortable, but not unbearable. For the soldiers in the lower hold, however, it was a hardship. Several had already fallen ill. After another rainy day, Suchan was meditating in his room when the door was suddenly knocked on. A short, burly man entered, bowed and said, Sir, several soldiers are sick. Please come take a look. Chen Shao, having said this, seemed afraid Suchan might refuse. He quickly added, It's not just their welfare. I'm worried about an epidemic affecting everyone on board. That reason caught Suchan's attention. He immediately put on his boots and went with Captain Chen Shao to the hold. Led by Chen Shao, Suchan descended into the lower deck. As they entered, a heavy, unpleasant odor assailed their noses. A result of poor ventilation and too many people packed inside, living, sleeping, and relieving themselves all in the same space. Had bred bacteria, combined with seasickness. The weaker soldiers fell ill. Even those still healthy looked sluggish. Suchan approached a coughing soldier, who had a slight fever, checked his temperature, and said, Nothing serious. I have antidote pills. Just dissolve one in water. Have each person drink a mouthful, and they'll recover. With that, he reached into his pocket, tapped the surface of the small container. He poured out a substandard antidote pill. Immediately, he dissolved it into a basin of water and distributed it among the sick soldiers. The high-grade pill's effects were immediate. The ailing soldiers were pleasantly surprised to find that their chest discomfort eased, their coughing lessened, and their minds cleared from foggy fatigue. Though still a bit weak, they felt a profound improvement in their condition. The other soldiers smiled too, and their gazes towards Suchan showed newfound gratitude and warmth. Suchan frowned. Why are you all cooped up in the hold? Why not get some fresh air on deck? With air this foul, it's no wonder you got sick. In the face of his question, Chen Shao revealed a pained expression. General Chu ordered it. We aren't allowed to leave the hold. We can't go on deck. We've been eating dry rations down here, he added. Hearing this, Suchan's face darkened. He turned to Chen Shao and asked, Why is that? The sick soldier, still coughing, explained. General Chu said, There are ladies on board, who often stroll on deck. He doesn't want us offending them. If anyone disobeys, it's 20 lashes. Suchan didn't respond immediately, but his expression grew colder. His gaze swept the dim, overcrowded hold. He saw the soldiers sitting upright, the chamber pots at their feet. Suchan suddenly understood. This medical consultation was a pretense. The real purpose was to have him seek justice. Soldiers were human too. They could no longer endure such conditions. Frustration filled their hearts. In their eyes, Suchan was the delegation's rightful leader, a court-appointed officer. Chu Shanglong's orders didn't count. Unless Suchan himself kept them confined, they wouldn't give up hope. Suchan furrowed his brow, saying nothing. I have only one command right now. The soldiers looked at him with hopeful, tense expressions. Everyone was on edge. Suchan bellowed, "What the hell? Go clean the damn chamber pots on deck?" A cheer erupted immediately. The soldiers rushed out, carrying their basins, some even laughing and joking as they went. In one of the luxurious cabins, Chu Shanglong sipped tea prepared by an attendant. He asked, "How is the consort doing lately?" The attendant replied, "She has been staying in her room, that large, lavish cabin, where, in truth, only a puppet was placed. The Real consort spent her days wandering around, blending in with the ordinary maidens. But even when she altered her appearance, her allure was undeniable. Even simple boatmen felt inexplicably drawn to her. That was why Chu Shanglong had forbidden the soldiers from going on deck. He wanted to quickly reach the north, where he would join the troops sent by the northern king, and they would be completely safe. However, just then, he heard a commotion from the deck, the sound of heavy footsteps, followed by loud, hearty laughter. Chu Shanglong's face darkened. The soldiers from the hold had all come up. Anger surged within him. Those ignorant fools! How dare they ignore my orders? Chu Shanglong stepped out onto the deck. There he saw groups of soldiers carrying chamber pots, emptying them into the river. The stench wafted on the breeze, assaulting his nostrils. Standing with hands behind his back, his expression turned icy. He shouted sternly, "Who gave you permission to come up here? You think numbers can protect you from punishment? Enjoying the deck, are you? Prepare the rods for a flogging." Chun Shao froze in shock. He hadn't immediately explained that Suchan had allowed it, fearing it would seem as though he was stirring the pot, fomenting discord between the two officers. Fortunately, Suchan arrived right after him. "General Chu, why the anger?" he said calmly. "I'm the one who allowed them up to clean." Chu Shanglong turned to Suchan, his tone sharp. "Suchan, are you unaware of my orders? If you didn't know, then have them return immediately, and make sure they don't come up again. If you did know, I need an explanation." Chun Shao mustered his courage and said, "General Chu, it's like this. A few soldiers fell ill, and I had no solution. So, I had no choice but to ask Sir Su for help." Suchan thought to himself that this officer was pretty good, loyal, and clever. Out loud, he snapped, "Who asked you to speak? Get out of here." Chun Shao lowered his head, staying silent. Though gratitude flickered in his eyes, he realized Suchan was trying to shield him from trouble. Suchan turned to Chu Shanglong. "General Chu, if you want an explanation, why not go down to the hold yourself? If you can stay there a few days, you'll get a much clearer sense of it." He continued firmly, "I've decided. From now on, soldiers in the hold may come and go freely. They will be allowed 6 hours a day on deck." He paused to let the point sink in. "This will improve the air quality, and it's beneficial for the soldiers' physical and mental health." The soldiers on deck exchanged excited glances, faces lighting up with joy. Chu Shanglong responded coldly, "Sir Su doesn't understand military discipline. Don't overstep. This bit of suffering is nothing. On the battlefield, you eat mud, sometimes even while lying among corpses." Suchan retorted sharply, "General Chu, you're a seasoned veteran. When it comes to leading troops, I defer to you. But if you want to debate logic, I'm more than happy to argue my case. You yourself said it. Battle conditions are extraordinary. Things can't remain as they are in normal times. Your soldiers squat in the muck every day, eating rations while surrounded by filth. These are elite troops. They endure rigorous training every day. They know how to fight. But hardship isn't the same as needless suffering. You train soldiers for 1,000 days to use them for a moment. If you don't know how to keep them in good shape, what kind of leader are you? How do you plan to fight a war? Face it, these aren't your soldiers, so you don't see them as human beings." The soldiers silently agreed. Chu Shanglong's disregard for them was obvious. They weren't his men, so he didn't treat them with respect. Chu Shanglong's expression twisted with anger, turning fierce and intimidating. "You're giving me orders. Who do you think you are?" Suchan stepped back, putting some distance between them. "I'm starting to think I gave in too easily last time. Maybe it made you think you had me figured out. You're clearly mistaken." To Chu Shanglong, the act of stepping back looked like hesitation. He was about to say something cutting, but then Suchan, from a pace away, suddenly lashed out. A vicious kick swept toward Chu's waist. There was no warning, no signal before he struck. Chu crossed his arms to block, and with a loud thud, the impact rippled through the air. It was as if he'd been hit by a battering ram. His legs slid backward, and he slammed into the ship's bulkhead. Suchan towered over him, his voice cold and deliberate. "I have a bad temper." Chu's arms throbbed, his nerves screaming in protest. He glared at Suchan in disbelief. He couldn't believe the man had actually hit him. Chu's guards roared in fury, rushing to aim their weapons at Suchan, at a single command. Meanwhile, 100 soldiers from the hold swarmed in as well, gathering around Suchan. They stood face to face, tense and silent. Their positions were unmistakable, even though the elite guards and the silver guards belonged to different departments. Answering to separate commands, Suchan was the chief officer of the delegation. He was the highest authority on the ship, and based on his words just now, he had earned their respect. A sudden shout came from the cabin. Several officials hurried out, drawn by the commotion. Members of the censorate rushed over, trying to calm things down. "Let's talk this out," one of them said. "No need for violence, gentlemen," an official from the Court of Judicial Review said sarcastically. "Impressive moves, Sir Su. With skills like that, you could take on the whole ship by yourself." Chu Shanglong glared fiercely at Suchan. "You're just in time," he snapped. "This soldier issue is just a pretext. He's really doing this to get back at me. How do you think we should handle this?" The Judicial Review official said bluntly. "There are ladies on board. It's inappropriate for soldiers to be on the deck. General Chu's orders are perfectly reasonable." A chief constable from the Ministry of Justice added, "I think Sir Su should apologize. Send the troops back below deck, and let that be the end of it. We need to remain united on this journey north." Meanwhile, the commotion on deck caught the attention of the consort, who was enjoying tea in her quarters. She came out to investigate, entirely unaware of what had transpired. She overheard her maids gossiping. "They say General Chu and Sir Su had a clash. They almost came to blows." The consort was stunned. From the maid's chatter, she pieced together the story, but she was curious as to why Suchan had acted this way. At that moment, Suchan sneered, "Apologize? To hell with apologizing. Don't forget, I am the Emperor's appointed lead officer. I'm the one in charge on this ship." The Judicial Review official retorted. "You may be the lead officer, but that doesn't mean you rule unilaterally. Otherwise, what's the point of us being here?" The chief constable from the Ministry of Justice said. His Majesty's directive was to proceed cautiously and work in coordination with the night watchers. "If you intend to run the show entirely on your own, I can't agree with that." Suchan had no patience for their objections. He called out loudly, "Attention, all troops. By order of His Majesty, I am the chief officer on this mission to the capital. This case is of utmost importance. To prevent leaks and sabotage, I am expelling any unauthorized personnel. Chu Shanglong and his men are to leave immediately." The moment he finished speaking, the 4 silver badges and 8 bronze badges drew their weapons, surrounding Chu Shanglong and his guards. Chu Shanglong shouted angrily, "Don't you dare move, all of you. Off the ship now." The 100-strong troops on the deck fell silent, hesitant to intervene. Chu Shanglong burst out laughing. "Suchan, you think a few bronze badges can remove me? How naive can you be?" As his words fell, a soldier turned and headed back below deck. Then another, and another. More and more soldiers quietly left the deck, returning below. Before long, the deck was empty. Chu Shanglong sneered, "See how these troops run off. Do you really think they'll back you? When it comes down to a fight, who'll stand with you?" Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps came from the stairs, a steady, pounding rhythm. The smirk on Chu Shanglong's face vanished. He turned, disbelief in his eyes. The 100 troops had returned. This time, instead of chamber pots, they held swords. In unison, the sound of blades being drawn filled the air. 100 soldiers leveled their swords at Chu Shanglong and his men. Chu Shanglong's expression shifted dramatically. He roared, "Are you trying to rebel?" The situation was spiraling out of control. Only then did he remember. Yang Yin was also aboard. He called out, "Yang Yin, night watchers, are you rebelling too?" His Majesty himself ordered me to accompany the delegation. Yang Yan's voice drifted out from the cabin. Yang Yan's tone was icy. "Orders? What orders? I don't know anything about that." Chu Shanglong's face turned pale. He glared at Suchan, his expression shifting several times, before finally swallowing his pride and giving in. Through gritted teeth, he said, "What do you want?" Suchan's voice was arrogant. "3 things. First, my orders stand. Soldiers get 3 hours of free time every day. Second, remember who I am. This delegation doesn't run on your say-so." He tapped his finger against Chu Shanglong's chest. "Clear enough?" Chu Shanglong's face was dark, but he nodded slowly. Suchan continued coldly, "Third, apologize." Chu Shanglong's expression twisted slightly, his forehead creasing, as his cheeks twitched with suppressed anger. His thoughts were frantic, but he kept telling himself to stay calm. Escorting the consort was crucial. He couldn't let his temper ruin everything. In the end, he relented. In a low voice he said, "Sir Su, please be magnanimous and forgive me." Suchan snorted. "Not bad. You're a sensible man." The soldiers behind him grinned broadly, their faces lighting up with unrestrained cheer. The consort watched from the deck, staring at Suchan in astonishment. At first glance, his actions seemed domineering, almost like reckless bravado. But on closer inspection, there was a method to his madness. She realized she'd been misled by appearances. The reason he could suppress Chu Shanglong was that he acted with a clear conscience. He stood his ground because he believed in his cause. As the saying goes, Those who follow the way gain allies. Those who defy it stand alone. She had to admit, Suchan was a bold, charismatic man, just a bit too flirtatious. With Chu Shanglong's retreat, the incident came to an end. Suchan reassured the soldiers and, as he passed by the matron, she shot him a coquettish glance. He immediately pulled a face of disdain, turning his head away. A true lecher through and through. Suchan entered the cabin, knocking on Yang Yan's door. Yang Yan, who had kept himself above the squabble, called out lazily, "Come in." Suchan pushed the door open, and asked in a low voice, "What's the deal with those ladies?" Yang Yan replied, "Chu Shanglong is escorting the consort to the capital. To avoid drawing attention, he snuck her into the delegation." "Was the emperor informed?" Su asked. "The emperor and Lord Wei are aware," Yang confirmed, "but they've kept it verbal, no official decree." "Why all the secrecy for escorting the consort to Beijing?" Su wondered. Yang shook his head. "I don't know, but there's clearly something fishy about it." Su leaned in and whispered, "Tell me more about this consort. Something about her feels off." Yang shook his head again. "I don't know much, just that after the Battle of Shanhaiguan, the emperor bestowed her upon Prince Huai. She hasn't left the capital in 20 years. Hearing nothing new, Su felt disappointed. He already knew these details, even recalling a poem about her. "I do know one thing," Yang added. "By crossing Chu Shanglong, you're sure to face trouble in Beijing. You've also earned respect. No one will dare challenge you on this journey." Su nodded. "The 3 examiners are untrustworthy. They're not truly committed to solving the case." Yang agreed. "You've seen it. They'll investigate when it's safe, but if danger arises, they'll shy away. After all, a failed assignment earns a reprimand. Losing your life is worse." Su nodded again. "I understand. It's human nature." Yang offered no further advice. He simply nodded, and asked, "Is there anything else?" When Su said no, Yang said, "Then leave. Don't disturb my training." Suchan, half laughing and half complaining, left the room. "You're the most boring person I've ever met. It's like you're one of those programmers from my past life. If a woman stripped in front of them, they'd just shout, 404 error." That night, under a clear moonlit sky, Suchan sat on the deck with a squad of soldiers, shooting the breeze. As he scanned their lean, weathered faces, he said with a proud tone, "When the Yunzhou rebels stormed the city, the governor, the provincial inspector, and all my colleagues were on the brink of death. I stood alone, sword in hand, against 8,000 rebels." Centurion Shan Xiao looked puzzled. "I heard it was 10,000 rebels." Other soldiers chimed in, arguing over the number. "I heard it was 15,000. No, my buddy in the garrison told me it was 20,000. Suchan felt the story was getting out of hand. A bit embarrassed, he thought. "This is going way over the top. I'm even starting to feel bad about it." He cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "It wasn't that many. Those are just rumors. Trust my count. It was only 8,000 rebels." 8,000 seemed more reasonable to Su. More than that felt too exaggerated. Even he sometimes wondered, just how many rebels did I kill that day? The soldiers nodded, convinced. If Suchan himself said it, it must be true. Su clapped his hands. "We'll reach Jiangzhou tomorrow. North of that is Jinzhou's border. We'll rest at Jiangzhou station for a day, resupply, and tomorrow everyone gets half a day off." The soldiers happily returned to their quarters. Su Darren is so kind. Not having to stay cooped up in the cabin these days, plus regularly cleaning the latrines. The environment's gotten so much better. Their complexions were visibly brighter. The bustling deck soon grew quiet, bathed in frost-like moonlight. The moon's reflection shimmered faintly on the river. Staring at his wine flask, Suchan suddenly heard someone curse him as a liar. He smiled shamelessly and said, "Oh, it's you, Auntie. You're just jealous of how good I am. How do you know I'm a con man? You're not even from Yunzhou." The old aunt snorted sharply and said, "How do you know I'm talking about Yunzhou's shores?" Suchan choked on that retort. He hadn't expected to be outplayed. Annoyed, he muttered, "Is there something you want, or not? If not, get lost." The old aunt retorted, "I won't get lost. This isn't your boat anyway." She was delicate, unaccustomed to the boat's swaying. These past few days, she hadn't slept well or eaten properly. Her under-eye bags were showing. She looked quite haggard. She had developed the habit of standing on the deck before bed to catch the breeze. Suchan looked up and sighed, saying, "This official feels inspired to compose a poem. You're lucky today." He laughed. "Later, you can take my poem and show it off." He sneered at her, full of disdain. But her ears perked up despite herself, even though she wanted to cut him down, or mock this man who constantly annoyed her. She knew when it came to poetry, he was regarded as a literary star in Dafeng. Insulting him would only make her look foolish. After waiting for a while without hearing his poem, the old aunt turned back impatiently. She found herself meeting a pair of sharp eyes. The old aunt instantly became angry. Suchan teased, "Didn't you say you didn't want to hear it?" Seeing her huff and turn away again, Suchan lost the mood to bully her. He tilted his head toward the moonlit sky, and began half sighing, half reciting, "Those alive now never, but this moon once shone on those long gone. The consort's eyes widened gradually, her lips whispering, all plain on her face. He could clearly see her amazement. I finally understand why the scholars in the capital so admire your poems, she said. Suchan smirked, lifting his chin. They don't admire me. I don't create poetry, I just deliver it, Suchan said with a laugh. You flatter me, you flatter me. Talent is something you're born with. I was born feeling as though my mind was filled with timeless masterpieces, ready at my fingertips. The cranky old aunt didn't argue or refute him. Instead, she pressed, and then what? Suchan spread his hands. I don't remember the rest. I only came up with that one line. That's it. The consort ground her teeth. I finally understand why so many people hate you. Silence fell again. The old aunt leaned on the railing. Suddenly, she asked, I heard you're going to Beijing to investigate the bloody case. What's that case about? Suchan offered his guess. Not sure for now. But I suspect it's about the Manchus invading the border, burning and looting everywhere, massacring people for miles. And the northern king just stayed inside the city walls, Suchan added. The consort nodded. If that's the case, aren't you afraid of offending the northern king? Suchan replied helplessly. I am. If it weren't my responsibility, I'd just turn a blind eye, mind my own business. But since it's fallen to me, I figure it might be fate. If it's fate, I have to see it. The consort didn't respond. Just gave him a deep look. Suchan's eyes shifted. He said, last year, while traveling to Yunzhou by boat, I encountered some strange things. One night, a clansman came to the deck, leaned on the railing just like you, staring down at the water. Then he suddenly turned to me with a horrified expression and said a water ghost jumped out of the river. The old aunt went pale, trying to sound tough. Nonsense, you're just trying to scare me. Suddenly, there was a loud splash. Water sprayed up from the river. She screamed and fell on the deck, sitting on the ground, hugging her head, trembling. Suchan burst out laughing, pointing at the old aunt's embarrassed state. He mocked. You got that scared over a wine jug? The old aunt got up silently, her face as cold as frost. Without a word, she walked away. Suchan called after her. Angry now? Hey, come back, Annie, let's chat a bit more. At dawn, the Guan ship would dock for a day. Suchan sent people ashore to gather supplies, dividing the guards into 2 shifts. One would stay aboard the Guan ship, and the other would head into town for half a day before switching. Taking advantage of the time, Suchan planned to visit a tea house in town, after lunch, bringing along some night patrol guards for company. As for Yang Yin, he would stay aboard the ship. Just then, Suchan suddenly heard retching sounds coming from a corner of the deck. He turned and saw the old aunt leaning over the rail, vomiting. Suchan teased, Auntie, are you pregnant? While speaking, he pulled out a handkerchief and handed it to her. Yesterday, I noticed you didn't look so good. What's going on? He asked with concern. The consort ignored him, took the handkerchief, wiped her mouth, and remained haggard-looking. Her eyes were bloodshot. Last night, she had been too scared to sleep. She kept imagining eerie eyes floating outside her window, or a hand reaching out from under the bed, or even a head hanging outside her paper window. She had spent the entire night hiding under the blankets, unable to sleep. Coupled with the ship's constant rocking, all the exhaustion she had built up finally hit her. Her head ached, her stomach churned. She felt miserable. It was all this guy's fault. Suchan muttered, if you won't talk to me, fine. Just don't keep me from my tea house outing. With that, he rounded up his friends and went ashore. Since ancient times, cities near harbors have generally flourished economically. The county seat of Huangyu County isn't particularly large, but its streets are wide and straight, bustling with pedestrians. It's quite lively. Suchan stood at the dock and surveyed the scene. Porters and laborers were busily coming and going, drenched in sweat. Scanning the area, he spotted a foreman sitting under a canopy, drinking tea. The foreman looked steadily at Suchan and quickly got up, bowing and scraping. He hastily pulled out a handful of silver fragments from his pocket, offering them with both hands. Honored gentleman, is there anything I can do for you? Suchan asked directly. Are you the foreman? Have you seen any refugees from the north recently? The foreman thought for a moment, shook his head, and said, Refugees? None at all. But I've heard rumors that the north is at war, with Manchus pillaging and burning everywhere. Fortunately, the northern king is defending the border. Otherwise, Chu Prefecture might have fallen by now. In an even tone, Suchan asked, You have great respect for the northern king? The foreman's face lit up with admiration. Of course. The northern king is a deity of Dafeng, the greatest warrior in Dafeng. Because of him, the north is stable. Suchan left with the silver gongs and copper gongs, feeling puzzled. When did the northern king become a deity? The true deity of Dafeng was Wei Gong, not the northern king. Watching them leave, the foreman was baffled. They didn't even take the silver. Are they out of their minds? After wandering the city for an hour, Suchan stopped at an inn, visited a tea house, and even struck up conversations with beggars. The accompanying watchman noticed something unusual. Suchan's outing seemed to have another purpose. One of them cautiously asked, "Sir, what are you investigating?" A seasoned silver gong smacked him on the head. "Use your brain. Do you really think he went to the tea house just to listen to songs? That Chu Shanglong might be involved in this case. His guards are watching from the boat. How could the boss openly say he's investigating a case?" Suchan nodded approvingly. "Not bad. You're quick-witted. A trail of blood 3,000 miles long. Such events usually occur during protracted battles, involving considerable troop deployments. If a conflict of that scale took place, there would be displaced refugees everywhere." A copper gong remarked, confused. "But today, we haven't seen a single refugee." Suchan nodded silently. "Exactly. This is highly unusual. Even though Jiangzhou is far from Chujo, we've been on the road for 10 days now. Surely some refugees would have made it here by now. This case is more complicated than I thought." "Interesting. This is the kind of case I want to handle. Something too simple would just be boring." The watchmen felt much more at ease. Though their leader hadn't been on the job for long, his wealth of experience, facing storms others couldn't imagine, gave them confidence. Before lunch, Suchan returned to the Guan ship, carrying the poems he'd collected. He climbed to the 3rd floor, stopped in front of a corner room, and knocked on the door. From inside came the irritated yet feeble voice of the old aunt. "Who is it?" "Suchan, you scoundrel." Without hesitation, Suchan shouted, "Fu Wenpei, open the door. I know you're home. If you can flirt with men, you can open the door." With a bang, the door swung open. The old aunt stood there in a brown dress, her eyebrows furrowed. "What nonsense are you spouting? Don't slander me for no reason." Suchan chuckled. "You're not Fu Wenpei. Why are you so angry?" "I brought you lunch." The old aunt rolled her eyes, and without thinking quipped, "Since when are you so considerate?" Suchan walked in without invitation, and placed the food on the table. He opened the container and laid out the dishes one by one. "I could tell this morning you didn't sleep well last night. Seasick, huh? And you definitely skipped lunch. So I bought you some food." The old aunt glanced at the dishes, realizing she hadn't seen these dishes before, and asked, "What's this one?" Suchan answered, "It's lieli fei. Tastes pretty good. It's one of the signature dishes from the best inn in Huangyu County. I got you the other signature dishes too." The old aunt shook her head, saying she didn't feel like eating. Having been pampered in the palace all these years, she had tasted every delicacy imaginable. Delicacies unattainable to commoners were nothing special to her. Suchan placed a bowl of soup on the table. "But you'll definitely like this," he said. The old aunt frowned at the blackish liquid, her face full of disdain. "If you're being this nice, you must have a reason. What's your goal?" Suchan had been waiting for her to say that. He cleared his throat and said, "Your consort is here too." Hearing the word consort, the old aunt's eyebrow twitched slightly. She tried to maintain a calm facade and nodded. Suchan asked curiously, "Why is the consort in the group? And I, the chief officer, didn't know about it in advance?" The old aunt snapped, "How would I know? If there's nothing else, get out. I'm going to sleep." Seeing she wouldn't say more, Suchan made an excuse and left. After the irritating man was gone, the consort considered packing up the food, but then caught a whiff of the tangy aroma. The smell was like an invisible hand, grabbing her appetite. She sat at the table, scooped a spoonful, and tasted it. It was better than she'd imagined. The spicy and tangy flavor awakened her taste buds, stimulating her appetite. After finishing the soup, she finally felt hungry, and the rest of the food on the table started to look tempting. Just then, there was a knock at the door. A voice came through. It was Chu Shanglong. "You don't need to speak, just nod or shake your head. What's your relationship with him?" On the ship, there's not only Jin Luo Yang Yin, but also other dancers. Dancers have sharp ears. Walls have ears, as they say. Even if you lower your voice, you can still be overheard. Hearing his words, the consort shook her head slightly without turning around. Chu Shanglong's gaze grew sharper. "Then you have no relationship with him? He'll be good to you." The consort huffed coldly, clearly annoyed, and refused to engage further. Chu Shanglong could only reluctantly accept this response. Musing on the consort's allure, men couldn't help but want to get close, to understand her. Before leaving, he gave her a warning. "Please remember your status, and don't get involved with outsiders." He then left the room. In another cabin, Suchan tried to collect his thoughts. Knowing nothing is a kind of information too, he thought. If I'm not mistaken, the northern consort's journey to Beijing isn't as simple as it seems. Her covert departure, and even I, the chief officer, wasn't informed in advance. Plus, the number of guards she brought is unusual. Too few. This could be interpreted as keeping a low profile, but also maintaining sufficient protection. Still, why all the secrecy? Why would the be shrouded in such mystery? Is it because her title as the most beautiful woman under heaven attracts too much attention? That doesn't seem to be the case in Dafeng. Who would dare make a move on the northern king's legitimate wife? Even someone as carefree and unconstrained as me never entertained such a thought. Analyzing her actions, it seems clear that the emperor doesn't want the consort's journey to be widely known. But that doesn't make sense. Why hide the fact that a consort is visiting her husband? Unless this consort is no ordinary person, involved in certain secrets. If that's the case, there are only two reasons for traveling in secret with the entourage. Either she's part of some covert plan, requiring discretion, or her journey involves risk, hence the need for the delegation's strength and protection. If danger is involved, precautions must be taken. Better safe than sorry. Suchan found this hypothesis both surprising and unsurprising, but for now, he didn't dwell on it. He had other priorities. He placed a cloth bag on the table. Meanwhile, after a hearty meal, the old aunt felt content. It had been a long time since she'd enjoyed food so thoroughly. It seemed like she hadn't savored a meal in ages. She used to eat just for the sake of eating. But before she could reflect further, another dilemma arose. Finally, she sighed, stood up, cleaned up the dishes, and carried them out of the room. She went down the stairs to the second floor, and, sure enough, found the troublemaker. Su Ningyin's room. Suchan turned around, irritated, and asked, "What now?" The consort, carrying the tray, replied sternly, "Take back your food." Suchan was momentarily stunned. Before him wasn't just an old aunt. She was like a celestial maiden. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief, wondering if he was imagining things. But when he looked again, the celestial maiden was gone, just the old aunt standing there. "What is it now?" she asked impatiently. "Where should I put this?" Suchan answered coolly, "Leave it by the door." Still wondering if he was just overtired, he began to think he might have been seeing things. The old aunt set down the tray and glanced curiously at the table. There were a few carved trinkets. "What are you carving these things for?" she asked. "The craftsmanship is terrible." Suchan replied flatly, "For a girl, of course." The old aunt stared at the trinkets on the table, and her smile slowly faded. Suchan began speaking in his usual eloquent manner, sharing his experience of courting women. "Every time I travel, I send some local specialties to the women who like me, and include a letter. It doesn't cost much, but it makes them happy, and like me even more. But of course not you." The old aunt was furious, storming out in a huff. "Just as I thought, a scoundrel of a man." Soon after, all the jade carvings were finished. "This small jade sword will be for Li Miaojin. No need to send it. I'll give it to her when we meet up north." Suchan spread out some prepared stationery and dipped his brush to write. The first letter was for Huiqing, sent during his journey. "Having arrived in Huangyu County, I found a local specialty, Huangyu jade. The jade is soft in texture, smooth to the touch, and quite to my liking. I've bought a rough stone to carve a seal for your highness. The seal bears the words, 'Your smile, like flowers blooming at dusk.'" The second letter was for his cousin, also sent mid-journey. "Having reached Huangyu County, I carved a jade pendant for your highness. I am a terribly mundane person. I see mountains as mountains, the sea as the sea, flowers as flowers. But when I see you, only one thought remains in my mind. 3 lifetimes, 3 worlds." After finishing, he placed the pendant in an envelope. The third and fourth letters were for Kaiwei and Lina, also sent mid-journey. "There are countless delicacies in the world. I've heard that in a distant, unreachable land, there's a rare delicacy known as Hujin cuisine. If I ever have the chance, I'd like to take you to find it." Searching the ends of the earth, he tucked the carved buns into the envelopes. The fifth letter was for Zhongli, also sent mid-journey. "Having arrived in Huangyu County, in my absence from the capital, stay well and keep the house in order. We must believe that these hard times will pass. Endure a bit more hardship, a bit more pain, and flowers will bloom from our suffering." He placed the octagonal jade carving inside. The sixth letter was addressed to Mingyue, sent en route. "Arrived at Huangyu County safely, but feeling a bit homesick, missing the gentle, kind sister back home. When I return, I'll make you some new jewelry." Lingyue was the most special sister in his heart. No one could replace her. The seventh letter was for Fuxiang. "I can't recall which great scholar said it. To have a confidant in life leaves no regrets. Fuxiang, you are that confidant for me, my cherished companion. I hope our bond will last forever, stronger than gold itself. Please let's continue." After finishing, Suchan let out a long breath. Every fish in the pond deserves unique attention, a clear display of care and value, making them feel like they're the most special. There's no room for half-hearted gestures. This is the self-cultivation of a true player. Looking at the finished letters on the desk, Suchan felt genuine satisfaction. "Last time at the Qingzhou border, I wrote 7 letters as well, 2 of them just filler, for my uncle and aunt. Now I've written 7 letters, just for women, including Li Miaojin. That makes 8. I'm thrilled by the growth of my pond project." Suchan left the room and first went to see Yang Yin. "I need to discuss something with everyone. Can we hold the meeting here?" Yang Yin was still engrossed in his diagrams. He frowned, naturally resistant to having his cultivation interrupted, but he slowly nodded. Suchan immediately instructed a silver gong. "Go invite Chu Shanglong and the 3 officers to this room." After sitting quietly for a few minutes, the 3 officers and Chu Shanglong arrived one after another. Naturally, none of them were pleased with Suchan. They glared at him, saying nothing. Suchan, however, began to speak in a surprising tone. He started by dropping a bombshell. "I'm changing our route. We'll go by land." Chu Shanglong immediately opposed it. Are you joking? This is impossible. The Dali official joined in. Lord Su, please don't be ridiculous. We'll reach our destination in just one more leg. If we switch to a land route, it'll take at least half a month. A reasonable directive they could tolerate, but changing from water to land was a major hassle. They'd have to arrange horses, carts, and transport wagons for over 200 people, all of whom needed food and supplies. It wasn't a simple shift. Furthermore, in military campaigns, only the highest-ranking commander could alter the route. Even though this wasn't a military operation, changing the route was still considered a serious misstep. The criminal department head turned to Yang Yin. Yang Jinluo, what's your take? Yang Yin shook his head without a word. Even his fellow watchmen didn't support Su Qian's decision, clearly indicating it was going against the tide. If he insisted, he'd only embarrass himself. Even the other watchmen probably wouldn't back him up. Chu Shanglong snorted coldly. If there's nothing else, this general will be leaving now. In the future, please keep these brainless ideas to a minimum. With that, he turned and left. At that moment, the criminal department head called out, General Chu, wait. Why not hear what Lord Su has to say first? Suchan looked at him with a hint of surprise. As expected of a seasoned officer in the criminal department, he was far more perceptive than the civil officials. One didn't become a criminal department head without experience. Over the past few days, he had grown increasingly uneasy. There were just too many suspicious details about this northbound mission. Suchan turned to Chu Shanglong and asked, General Chu, why is the consort traveling with the delegation? Chu Shanglong narrowed his eyes. The consort is going to Beijing to reunite with the Prince of Huai. What's the issue? Suchan pressed further. I'm the delegation's organizer. Why wasn't I informed beforehand? Chu Shanglong said flatly, it's just a small matter. The consort is simply passing through to head north. Her noble status calls for discretion. Suchan's face darkened. If her status is so noble, why wasn't she assigned a military escort? At that, the Dali temple official chimed in. Exactly. The Guan ship is full of all sorts. If it was known the consort was aboard, at the very least another ship should have been prepared. Chu Shanglong glared at the officials from the three ministries, clearly annoyed. These old foxes. Just days ago they were openly hostile towards Suchan, and now, when something potentially risky came up, their stance became ambiguous. Suchan gave a cold laugh. Just as Captain Chun said, if the consort is traveling to Beijing to reunite with the Prince of Huai, His Majesty could simply assign her a military escort. Why all this sneaking around, blending in with the delegation, and keeping it a secret even from us? Did any of you know Do you understand what that implies? The Dali temple official and the two censors shook their heads, and quickly asked Lord Su, please speak plainly. Su Qian declared emphatically, it implies that if her presence were known, she might face danger, possibly an ambush. That's likely why His Majesty had to keep it under wraps. The two censors and the Dali temple official furrowed their brows, their expressions growing more serious. Yang Yan's expression remained unchanged, as if he had anticipated this. Chu Shanglong snorted. The consort's northern trip does have another purpose. But Lord Su, there's no need to exaggerate. The consort's departure was a secret even from you. So how could anyone else have known? Even if there were an ambush, it would take time to set up. We've been traveling swiftly by water, and the consort's presence has been kept under wraps. Why would we encounter an ambush? The Dali temple official and the others nodded slowly, finding Chu Shanglong's argument reasonable. Suchan smiled and spread out a map. Everyone, please remain calm. Let me finish my explanation before you decide. He pointed to a section on the map where the current ran swift and the passage was narrow, saying, at the speed we're traveling by boat, we'll reach this area by tomorrow evening at the latest. This passage is narrow, and there's no way to turn the ship around. If the enemy sets an ambush here, we'll have no chance of survival. In short, if there's going to be an ambush along the way, this is where it will happen. Chu Shanglong stared at the map for a moment before arguing back. All of this assumes there are enemies lying in wait. I've already said, the enemy has no way of knowing about this trip. Where would the ambush come from? Once we pass this point, we'll reach the garrison within a day. The prince's troops will meet us there. Mission accomplished. If we switch to a land route and take 2 weeks instead, then we're giving the enemy time to prepare. Su Qian sneered. Yes, a land route may be slower, but it gives us room to maneuver. If we're ambushed here tomorrow, we'll be wiped out completely. There won't be any second chances. Yang Yin had remained silent throughout, but his unwavering attitude showed. He fully supported Su Qian. Captain Chan of the Ministry of Justice was the first to speak up. I agree with Lord Su's decision. Let's change the route. The Dali Temple official quickly followed. I also support Lord Su's decision. Let's start preparing to change routes tomorrow. Compared to the hassle of switching to a land route, the fear of a total wipeout on the water was much greater. No one wanted to risk their lives. Chu Shanglong's face twitched as he said, Lord Su, I'll make a wager with you. If there's no ambush here tomorrow, what will you do? Su Qian responded without hesitation. Then you'll have the final say on all matters in the delegation. But if we're ambushed, what then? Chu Shanglong replied firmly. Whatever you say goes. Su Qian shrugged. Suchan said dismissively. Right now, if I say one, you dare say two. Chu Shanglong's expression darkened. What do you want? 3,000 taels of silver, Suchan said coolly, and the Beijing garrison's exit records. Chu Shanglong agreed without hesitation, thinking to himself that he could just renege later. Once in Beijing, the final decision would be his. After all, he had soldiers, officers, and the Northern King's support. Suchan seemed to guess his thoughts. With a cold laugh, he said, put it in writing. Chu Shanglong froze, then grudgingly agreed. But if you lose, he countered, you'll owe me 3,000 taels of silver too. Both sides wrote out their agreement, but no verdict would come yet. The results would be decided tomorrow. Suchan turned to Yang Yin and said, let's discuss. If tomorrow you and the boatman do a reconnaissance run, how many people can you take along? Yang Yin thought for a moment. 6. Suchan hesitated. 6 is clearly not enough to handle the ship, he thought. If there are more, I can't save them all. And if we really hit an ambush tomorrow, the other boatmen are doomed. At this point, Yang Yin said, tomorrow I can use my abilities to adjust the sails, control the ship. We won't need the boatmen to row. Just a few people to steer will do. Suchan let out a heavy sigh of relief. Fine, he said, let's do that. With the plan set, the officials of the three ministries, along with a disgruntled Chu Shanglong, left to prepare. They began informing the guards and female attendants aboard. Suchan thought to himself, if there's no ambush tomorrow, then it means the supposed enemy doesn't exist, or they didn't have time to prepare, and we can all breathe a little easier. Yang Yin asked, but what if there is an ambush? Suchan sighed, lowering his voice. Then we're in trouble. We'll be caught before we even reach Beijing. If the situation turns bad, I have another plan, Suchan muttered. Let me discuss it with Yang Yin. The next morning, a 200-strong convoy departed Huangyu County. While Chu Shanglong's soldiers marched in formation, the convoy pressed northward along the official road, kicking up clouds of dust. Suchan, riding on horseback, brooded. If Yang Yan's side encounters no ambush, we'll have to switch back to water travel in 2 days. This overland route is exhausting. At that moment, the curtain of a nearby carriage lifted, revealing a plain-looking face. Suchan approached and asked, what's the matter, little aunt? What is it? The consort, seated in the slightly jostling carriage, asked in confusion, why did we switch to land travel? Suchan replied, isn't it for the consort's safety? If Chu Shanglong hadn't insisted on bringing you along, would we have to suffer this much? The consort thought it over, and, surprisingly, instead of retorting, nodded solemnly, indicating agreement. By evening, the currents at Flowstone Shoals were ferocious, strong enough to sweep away boulders, hence the name. A massive three-masted ship was struggling against the current. As it reached the middle of the shoals, suddenly the churning water surged, and a thick, black-scaled form emerged briefly, then sank below. A few seconds of silence followed, then a deafening roar. The massive ship was lifted into the air. Amidst the spraying water, a black-scaled dragon broke the surface, its horns piercing the hull and hurling it skyward. The enormous ship, which could carry over 200 people, shattered apart. As the debris fell, Yang Yin unleashed his powers, lifting 6 crew members into the air. A burst of energy exploded at his feet, propelling him and the others to safety above. The flood dragon plunged into the depths, sending up a towering spray. A man in a black robe rose from the water, standing atop the surface. Not far off, a man in white calmly said, they won't escape. We've dispatched enough people this time. Yang Yin, a mere 4th grade, can't fend off so many. The consort is already ours. The man in black frowned. Are you sure there's no other 4th grade in the delegation? The man in white gestured confidently. Trust my eyes. Even if there were another 4th grade, our arrangement leaves no room for error. As the sun set, the skies remained bright for quite a while. Before night finally descended, the Dali Temple official turned to Suchan. Lord Su, how confident are you? Suchan shook his head slightly without answering. How could he be confident? Sending Yang Yin into what might be a trap was a test in itself. Chun, the captain, remarked. By now, Yang should have reached Flowstone Shoals. If there's an ambush, he would already know. And will he report back? Suchan said calmly, I left signals along the route. He'll follow them to find us. With his abilities, he'll catch up quickly. It shouldn't take long. As early as tonight, or by tomorrow morning at the latest. As he finished speaking, Suchan sensed a faint energy ripple, approaching from the distance. He abruptly stood up, his hand instinctively going to the hilt of his black gold blade. On the other side, Chu Shanglong also tensed, looking southward with alarm. From the darkness came a figure, walking steadily, carrying a silver spear. It was Yang Yin. At his arrival, Suchan and Chu Shanglong each showed their own mix of relief and anticipation. Suchan bent down, picked up a water pouch, and approached. What's the situation? Yang Yin took the pouch and drank deeply. Flowstone Shoals had a flood dragon lying in wait, he said. The ship was sunk. Everyone was shocked by the news. Any remaining hope was completely dashed. The campfire cast light on Suchan's slightly contracted pupils. There was really an ambush, he muttered. Why is it that what you fear most always comes true? Is Murphy's Law universal? Captain Chan turned sharply to Suchan, saluting. Thanks to Lord Su's vigilance, we anticipated the ambush and avoided disaster. The Dali Temple official's mood sank, but his gaze towards Suchan was filled with respect. Suchan simply said, the situation is grim. We are exposed, and the enemy is hidden. They know we have no reinforcements on the ship. They'll definitely pursue us on land. Everyone, keep alert and patrol carefully. The consort, curled up in a corner of the carriage, was startled awake by the commotion of hurried footsteps and voices. She leaned toward the window. Why so noisy in the middle of the night? What's going on? She asked. Chu Shanglong replied. Yang Yin is back. He said there was an ambush at Flowstone Shoals. The ship was sunk. Rest well. We'll be rushing again at dawn. The consort gasped, shaken by a strong sense of foreboding. The ambush was meant for me, she thought. Thank goodness he was there. Nearby, Yang Yin sat cross-legged on a tree stump, accepting a cup of tea from the Dali Temple official. The attack involved a black-scaled flood dragon, he said. It must have been a northern demon clan dragon. Its strength was at least 4th grade. I couldn't beat it in the water. Suchan's expression darkened. Chu Shanglong's 5th grade capabilities weren't enough against a 4th grade demon, and the ambush was set up so quickly. There must be a mole in the court. He pondered briefly before asking, General Chu, do you know anything about this dragon? Chu Shanglong hesitated before replying, it's a black-scale dragon. If I'm not mistaken, it's likely Tang Shanjun. Suchan's eyes gleamed. So, you do know it, he thought. When I learned of the Chu Shanglong's expression was equally shocked. This consort is truly extraordinary, he remarked, to warrant such elaborate efforts by the demon clans. Badu asked in a low voice. Yang Jinluo, besides the black-scale dragon, were there any other enemies? Yang Yin shook his head and said, I didn't see any. Suchan seized the opportunity to add, the northern Manchus and northern demon clans are closely allied. If the demon clans are taking action, can the Manchus be far behind? The 3 civilian officials seemed agitated. Lord Su's analysis is very reasonable. It might even be the truth. In fact, I believe that since there's a grade 4 adversary on the river, couldn't there also be a grade 4 ambush, or even more grade 4s elsewhere? The officials continued. The northern Manchus and demon clans, acting in unison, could easily deploy a number of grade 4s. Grade 4 masters, renowned figures in the martial world, regional overlords, though rare in the court, they are not lacking. The northern Manchus and demon clans are essentially a northern coalition. The court officials then turned to Chu Shanglong. Why would the northern Manchus and demon clans go to such lengths to assassinate the consort? How were they able to set up this ambush in advance? Chu Shanglong coldly replied, that's not for you to know. Suchan frowned and fell into deep thought. Even our own people are being kept in the dark. That further confirms my earlier suspicions. The consort's secretive northern journey was intended to guard against enemies within the court. But what consequences will her arrival in the capital bring? There must be deeper intrigue behind all this. At this moment, Chu Shanglong turned to Yang Yin. Yang Jinluo, were you followed on your way here? He asked. Without even glancing at him, Yang Yin resolutely shook his head. Chu Shanglong didn't press further. Good. We still have a chance to escape. We can't continue heading north. Tomorrow morning, we'll change course toward Jiangzhou City. It's the main city of the province. Even a grade 4 demon clan member wouldn't dare to charge in recklessly. Once we reach Jiangzhou City, we can either request reinforcements from the court, or mobilize the Jiangzhou City garrison to escort us. Chun Badu hesitated and said, that makes sense. But detouring to Jiangzhou City will take at least 2 days. With the pace of a grade 4 expert, they're sure to catch up before we arrive. Chu Shanglong responded. Then we must abandon the carriages and supplies, and leave the main roads. We'll travel through the side paths with a leaner team, moving as quickly as possible to Jiangzhou City. Suchan had to admit that Chu Shanglong was quite shrewd. To rise to the position of deputy under the Northern King, he was clearly no ordinary individual. With that in mind, he said, I agree with General Chu's plan. Relay the orders immediately. Don't wait until morning. We move out now. The officials stepped out of the tent, gathered their men, and began issuing orders for a nighttime march. Chu Shanglong woke the consort. There's been an incident. The enemy is likely on their way to catch up with us. I've decided to take the mountain path to avoid pursuit. Please prepare to leave immediately. The elderly aunt was almost frightened out of her wits, but her survival instincts forced her to calm down, pack some dry rations, and get ready to leave. Abandoning some of their supplies, the convoy, now carrying only dry rations and water, left the Guandao, crossed the Tiangung Plain, and began a grueling trek through the mountains. A weary elderly aunt leaned toward Suchan, panting as she asked, will we make it to Beijing safely? Suchan snapped back, you're a maid of the royal palace. You should ask Chu Shanglong. The consort murmured, I'm scared, and I don't trust him. Fearful, she instinctively sought out Suchan. Maybe deep down, she believed that in this convoy, Suchan was the person who could truly help them, the person who truly gives him a sense of security. Is not Jin Luo Yangyan, nor Chu Shanglong, who is sworn to loyalty to the Northern King, but this young man who has been playing tricks on him along the way. The night watchman, Suchan asked with no expression, "Are you afraid of dying?" Chu Shanglong's plan is flawless, and as long as we can reach Jiangzhou safely, once we're in Jiangzhou, we'll be safe. Besides, you're just a maid. What's there to be afraid of? If the situation turns bad, just run. Will a grade 4 expert be concerned about you? The elderly aunt's legs gave way, unable to move, gasping for breath as she said, "I'm afraid I won't make it to Jiangzhou." Suchan smiled and suggested, "Then I'll carry you." He shook his head sadly, but then gathered his courage and carefully said, If the pursuers intercept us, will you not fight? Will the night watchman protect the consort? Suchan immediately rejected without thinking, "Of course not. Our task is to solve the case, not to protect the consort. The consort's life or death has nothing to do with us. If the enemy is too strong, we'll just run." After all, their target is the consort. The consort's eyes dimmed, her small face pale with no color. She seemed resigned to it. Standing frozen, unmoving, she seemed out of place with the others, lonely and pitiful. However, just then, Suchan and Yangyan's hair stood on end, almost simultaneously. Chu Shanglong and Qinbadu suddenly looked up, their gazes locked on the mountain behind them. From the forest ahead, a giant rock flew out, hanging above their heads before crashing down. Chu Shanglong instinctively glanced at the consort. His instinct was to rush and save her, but he stopped. Realizing that intervening now would expose their position, Yang Yin reacted the fastest, immediately drawing his silver spear and rising into the air. The tip of the spear trembled slightly. A burst of red sound bloomed. With a cracking noise, the giant rock, capable of crushing half the delegation into paste, shattered into tiny pieces of stone, raining down in a clatter. The boulder shattered into small pieces. The fragments rained down with a pat. The fragments hit the helmets of the soldiers, barely noticeable. A handmaid without protective gear squatted on the ground, covering her head, as the guards shielded. Suchan suddenly turned his head, instinctively worried about the little ant's safety, but he saw something unexpected. A soldier from Beijing had stepped forward. He was actually using his own body to protect a maid. That was strange, but just then, the ground suddenly shook. A towering figure 10 feet high, a creature covered in black fur, licked its lips, and its bloodthirsty gaze swept over the delegation. From the southern woods, there was also movement. Trees fell in groups, and a black-scaled Jiao dragon emerged from the forest. Its thick trunk-like neck coldly observed everyone. Zamuha, stop throwing your worthless rocks. If you kill the princess, it's all for nothing. Suchan looked solemnly at the monster before him. This Jiao dragon was enormous. Such a huge body was ill-suited for combat. Taoist Lian had once said in the ancient tomb that the demon race doesn't focus on size. Could this Jiao dragon possess a demon god's bloodline? At that moment, another powerful figure appeared. She wore a red dress and had black hair, tied into a ponytail with a red ribbon. She walked across the overgrown wasteland, saying, "I want Yang Yin. No one else is allowed to take him. As for the others, do whatever you want. Capture them, kill them, whatever." Her words finished, and Dali Temple Chung collapsed to the ground, his legs trembling. His face turned ashen, and he cried out in near panic, "The three-headed clan. It's over. It's over. They've caught up to us." Chu Shanglong's face turned despondent. His throat went dry. Even a battle-hardened general like him felt utterly hopeless in the face of this situation. Suchan barked in a low voice, "Chu Shanglong, who are these people?" He took a deep breath. Bitterly, he said, "The Black Jiao sect. Tongshan Lord, one of the 3 leaders of the Jiaobu, adept at water maneuvers. The man on the mountain is the leader of the Manchu Heishui tribe, Zamuha. The Heishui tribe is known for their immense strength, second only to the ancient Zuli tribe. As for this woman, she's a snake demon. Her name is Hongling. She and her kin are attached to the Manchu Qingyan tribe. Hongling herself is a concubine of the Qingyan tribe's leader." After a pause, Chu Shanglong said in despair, "They're all 4th-rank experts. Those powerless civilian officials were already desperate enough, but hearing this made them wish they'd never been born." At this moment, the stunning woman called Hongling smiled coquettishly. "Isn't this the dupe? I've been longing for you ever since the Battle of Tsujiang River 3 years ago." Chu Shanglong calmly replied, "A defeated general's bravery is not worth mentioning." Hongling's voice remained sultry, her enchanting face always smiling. "A group of misfits. Aside from Yang Yin, only General Chu is passable. Hand over the princess obediently, and I'll grant you a blissful end." At this point, Suchan said loudly, "How did you track our delegation?" Hongling, seeing that the question came from a handsome Luo, showed a trace of interest. "Take a guess," she said. Suchan's heart stirred. and he smirked. You must have had a sorcerer's help. The woman in red instantly changed expression, looking at him with sharp suspicion. How do you know that? Suchan internally ridiculed her. This woman is so stupid. She gave away the answer in an instant. It's a shame that it's once again a sorcerer causing trouble. Whenever the word, I can't help but feel uneasy, is the sorcerer who implanted that chi resonance in me the mastermind behind all this? I'm fairly sure it isn't. This scheme was aimed at the princess. I just got caught up in it by accident. When Suchan didn't answer, Hongling seemed annoyed. She drew a dagger and charged at him. After all, you're just a little silver gong. I'll keep you alive long enough to make you talk. Yang Yen is yours. The rest and Chu Shanglong are mine. Tangshan Lord lifted his head and let out an earth-shaking roar to the sky. Chu Shanglong, I can handle him myself. As soon as he finished speaking, a murky underground current burst forth. The torrent spun and surged into the sky, forming a giant waterspout. Yang Yen dashed forward with his silver spear, charging straight into the base of the waterspout. The spear tip stabbed into the spinning current. He let out a deep, determined shout, and the waterspout instantly collapsed. Murky rain poured from the sky, but just as Yang Yen broke through the waterspout, Hongling, wielding two short blades, moved like a phantom. Her target was also Yang Yen. Her earlier statement had been a decoy. Her true target was Yang Yen from the start. She intended to eliminate this golden gong as quickly as possible. Fortunately, Yang Yan's combat experience was extensive. He instinctively turned and blocked Hongling's attack with his spear, but doing so left his back exposed. Zamuha seized the opportunity to deliver a powerful headbutt. Yang Yen spun twice in the air before regaining his footing. With his spear tip planted on the ground for leverage, he performed an incredible aerial flip and sent Zamuha flying with a sweep of his spear. Suchan watched in astonishment. A year ago, when Yang Yen had fought Zhang Luzong at the Yamen, he couldn't follow their moves at all. Now, after significant improvement, he could finally keep up with the combat of fourth-rank experts. Yang Yan's mastery of his skill was unparalleled. Though it seemed Zamuha had landed a hit, it didn't faze Yang Yen in the slightest. In fact, his body was like iron and steel, leaving him unharmed. He used the momentum to break free from the encirclement, regaining the offensive position. At that moment, Chun Shao shouted, "Fire the arrows!" 100 soldiers drew their bows. Some aimed at Tangshan Lord, others targeted the massive black bear charging down. The arrows struck, but they snapped upon hitting the two fourth-grade experts, failing to inflict any damage. However, that was enough. All they needed was to buy some time. Chun Shao turned to shout orders, but he froze mid-sentence. Chu Shanglong had already and escaped far away from the group. Chu Shanglong's personal guards followed suit, carrying others, leaving the rest of the envoy team to fend for themselves. Seeing this, Chen Butu of the Ministry of Justice was enraged. The officials from the Court of Judicial Review were hopping mad, cursing. If it weren't for Chu Shanglong, our envoy wouldn't be in this crisis. Suchan's eyes narrowed as he observed the fleeing soldiers. If Chu Shanglong intended to escape, why bother with the maid's safety? That must mean the princess was disguised. The Real princess was likely among the maids, and the soldiers scattered to confuse the enemy. But Suchan didn't care about that. He needed to deal with the immediate threat first. Cover me as I handle that woman, he said. I'll keep the other two occupied. With a ground-shaking rumble, he leaped skyward, rocketing like a firework, crashing into the giant's chest. The giant's blubber rippled from the impact. Zamuha spoke human words. Such a tough body. Tangshan Lord's icy gaze flared with hatred. A long-standing blood feud existed between the demon clans and Buddhist sections. Generations of vengeance. As Suchan landed, he pulled out a sheet of paper and ignited it. Reciting softly, he said, "Put down the butcher's knife. Attain enlightenment on the spot." Tangshan Lord's massive frame instantly stiffened, frozen in place, unable to move. Seeing this, the soldiers nearby drew their weapons to help. However, Suchan shouted angrily, "Stay back. All of you listen. Take the two officials and leave at once. Retreat to Jiangzhou. No one is allowed to engage the enemy. In moments of crisis, a leader who can rise up and turn the tide is more worthy of following than an emperor." Chun Shao shouted with determination, "Master Su, I'm willing to fight by your side, even if it means death." The soldiers roared, "We'll fight with Master Su, even if it means death." Suchan angrily shouted, "That's an order. You'll only get yourselves killed if you stay. Leave now, or I'll cut you down myself." Chun Zhao's eyes turned red. He realized Suchan insisted on their retreat to protect them, to avoid seeing his comrades die needlessly. A bronze gong stepped forward to pull him away. "Come on, we need to go. The boss said it's an order. When he says go, we go. High-level fights can't be won by sheer numbers. Do you want to drag everyone down?" Chun Shao stopped protesting. He solemnly saluted. "Master Su, take care." The Court of Judicial Review's official also bowed deeply. "Master Su, words cannot express my gratitude. If I survive this ordeal, I will repay this kindness." Zamuha sneered and mocked. "A bunch of nobodies. How far can you run?" After I deal with you, I'll catch them one by one and eat them. Tangshan Lord also did not intervene, twisting his dragon-like body and examining Suchan. Their aura is weak, not a 4th grade expert, but their Vajra-level martial arts mastery is impressive. That book is a Confucian classic. Even kill them. Zamuha took the opportunity to charge. The massive figure bore down on Suchan. Suchan snapped his fingers, igniting the paper between them, and the black hair within the page ignited. Zamuha, who had been charging, suddenly stopped, as if struck by a club to the head. He fell to his knees in pain. A curse technique. Suchan was about to take the chance to strike, but then he heard a gust of wind. Tangshan Lord's dragon head charged at him, yet Suchan's expression remained calm. He swung his blade at the dragon's head. Tangshan Lord roared in pain and flew back, surprised at the sharpness of the black gold blade. He hesitated to engage further, realizing it might pierce his scales. As these thoughts crossed his mind, Zamuha broke free of the curse. He immediately lunged forward. Suchan remained composed, tearing out another page of paper, lighting it and running it along his blade. In an instant, the black gold blade seemed to come alive, spinning and flying freely through the air. It danced and attacked Tangshan Lord from various angles. Its sharp edge pierced his scales, causing him significant pain. Meanwhile, Zamuha delivered a powerful punch, creating a large crater where he struck. Fortunately, Suchan reacted quickly and dodged. Zamuha mocked him. Boy, don't be scared. One punch from me, and you'll be reunited with your ancestors. But then, suddenly, the black gold blade returned from attacking Tangshan Lord, slashing Zamuha unawares. A deep wound opened, blood spurting out. Zamuha roared with rage, hurling massive boulders at Suchan. As boulders rained down, Suchan darted up the mountain, dodging each massive projectile. Tangshan Lord, driven mad by the blade's sting, relentlessly pursued him. In the forest, Suchan nimbly maneuvered, closing in to strike again. He opened his mouth to bite, but his teeth found nothing but air. Suchan's figure suddenly vanished. He reappeared 100 meters away. It was the sorcerer's teleportation formation. He had just burned another page of enchanted paper. Zamuha struggled to contain his rage, roaring, "Abilities from every system? That spellbook. It's more precious than most magical artifacts. Who exactly is he?" Suchan gazed coldly. At present, all he could do was stall them, lacking sufficient offensive means to deal real damage. His heaven and earth slash, and the residual effects of Confucianist words become law, came with steep costs. Without a sure kill, he dared not use them lightly. Last time, his soul was stabilized, with help from Li Miaozhen. This time, with only Yang Yin nearby, the best Yang could do was dig a grave for him. More importantly, the spellbook would eventually run out. The true outcome of this fight hinged on the battle between Yang Yin and the woman in red. On Yang's end, he unleashed a storm of spear energy, summoning countless spears at once. The woman in red scrambled to defend. Lapse left her struck, eliciting a sharp cry. She quickly retreated, furiously shouting, "What are you two doing? Hurry up and help me take down Yang." But her calls were ignored. Tangshan Lord and Zamuha were both too entangled by Suchan. They had no time to respond. Noticing this, the woman's delicate face betrayed a look of astonishment. The silver badge officer was actually holding off two fourth-rank opponents. With that realization, she gave up on any plan to deal with Yang Yin. She fled north. Tangshan Lord and Zamuha glared at Suchan. In frustration, without hesitation, he withdrew alongside the woman in the red dress. Suchan turned to Yang Yin and said, "Stick to the plan. You find the envoy group, I'll go rescue the princess." Yang Yin hesitated before asking, "Can you handle it?" Suchan nodded confidently. "Relax. That was just a warm-up. I haven't even used the Confucian words become law technique yet. At my level now, not even a fourth rank can keep me here if I want to leave." Parting ways with Yang Yin, Suchan couldn't shake his unease. Ever since deciding last night to counter the demon clan's ambush, he had been trying to awaken the monk within the divine book, but received no response. Finally, shouting, "Baldy, your wife ran off with someone else," did the monk finally awaken. Upon learning he could absorb the essence blood of fourth-rank experts, the monk eagerly agreed to lend a hand. In his mind, Suchan communicated, Master, just don't destroy their souls. I need them for questioning." The monk's gentle voice carried a smile. "I understand, but from what I've deduced, there may be more than 3 fourth ranks. They must have other reinforcements. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let Chu Shanglong escape just now. Of course, this is all the better for me. The essence blood of fourth-rank masters is nothing short of a feast." The opportunity to face multiple fourth ranks was a once-in-a-lifetime chance for the monk. Meanwhile, Chu Shanglong carried the imposter princess as he fled. fully aware that running with the princess would make him the main target of pursuit. When they caught up, he could just throw the woman on his back to them. Once they discovered she was a fake, at most, they'd send one person after him. Maybe they wouldn't chase him at all. They'd likely regroup to intercept the others. He chuckled to himself, thinking the deaths of a few envoys were insignificant. What right did they have compared to the princess? And my life are nothing in comparison. As Chu Shanglong sprinted forward, he suddenly heard the sound of something slicing through the air. His warrior's instincts kicked in immediately. Without a moment's thought, he dodged to the left with a swift leap, barely evading the aerial attack. The projectile streaked past him and, with a loud boom, exploded not far ahead. Chu Shanglong looked up at the sky. What he saw made his expression change drastically. In the bright blue sky above, there floated a creature resembling a spider, with thunderous wings. It hovered ominously, and atop it stood a man clad in tiger skin, a single leaf-like growth on his forehead. This was Tianlang, leader of the Jinmu tribe, one of the 12 tribes of the Manchu. The Jinmu tribe was famed among the 12 Manchu tribes for their aerial prowess. Every adult tribesperson raised and bonded with a flying beast. In conflicts between the northern garrison and the Manchu, the Jinmu tribe had long been a significant headache for the northern forces. The Jinmu tribe consistently posed a serious threat to the northern garrison. It was common knowledge that warriors below the 4th rank couldn't fly at all. Even 4th-ranked warriors could only stay aloft briefly, and their altitude was limited. Facing a true flying 4th-rank opponent, they were at a distinct disadvantage. However, what caused Chu Shanglong's expression to change wasn't the realization that there was another 4th-rank opponent. It was the sight of the spider-like creature's fangs, from which strands of silk dangled. At the end of each strand was a cocooned captive. Chu Shanglong quickly understood. No wonder Hong Ling and the others hadn't pursued him. Tianlang had been lying in wait all along. What's more, the real princess was among the captives. At this moment, Tianlang drew the bow from his back, knocked an arrow, and pulled the string. The massive bow bent into a full arc. The bowstring hummed, and the arrow shot out like a streak of light. In a panic, Chu Shanglong bit down and made a snap decision. He lifted the woman on his shoulder high, using her as a human shield. Then, a bizarre scene unfolded. The arrow suddenly veered off course, avoiding the princess. The arrow lodged into the soil at her feet, but Chu Shanglong was overcome by intense anxiety. Pushing the princess away to let her escape was a futile effort, as the false princess clung to him. There was no chance of getting away. Tianlang, however, did not let up. He continued to draw his bow, firing arrows at Chu Shanglong from all directions. Chu Shanglong had no choice but to keep running. Without looking back, he relied solely on his warrior instincts to dodge the arrows. However, all his efforts were in vain. An arrow struck Chu Shanglong in the back, but it didn't penetrate his defenses. The second arrow followed immediately, hitting the same spot and piercing through. Chu Shanglong spat out blood and collapsed, his fate uncertain. The flying beast landed, and Tianlang approached Chu Shanglong, saying flatly, "Lucky for you, those arrows weren't aimed at you. You just happened to get in the way. Don't rely too much on a warrior's intuition," he continued. "It can only sense malevolent attacks for just a brief moment. When multiple attacks come at once, you can't perceive them all." Chu Shanglong glared at him, his face full of defiance. "This was all part of your plan." Tianlang picked up the trembling princess, his tone cold as he said, "Isn't it only natural for a hunter to set traps?" A quarter of an hour later, the red-robed woman and the giant Zarmuha arrived, accompanied by the human-shaped Tang Shanjun. Tang Shanjun was astonished. "You've caught the princess?" Tianlang's expression remained impassive. "You look like you've had a hard time. The three of you together still couldn't kill Yang Yin?" Hong Ling's face darkened as she explained, "We stumbled. There's a tough one among the envoy. That silver gong isn't particularly strong, but he's protected by the Buddhist Diamond Sutra. Moreover, he carries a Confucian text containing spells from various systems. He's incredibly troublesome. Even with two against him, Tang Shanjun couldn't subdue him, so they had to retreat." The counterfeit princess's disguise faded, revealing a delicate face. "She's fake. The real one must be among these maids." Hong Ling's voice was exceptionally seductive. "Tell me, who is the real princess?" The counterfeit princess's face turned pale, fear sparkled in her eyes, and her shoulders trembled violently. Stammering, she said, "I don't know." The woman in red sighed deeply. "That answer is very unsatisfactory. Let me give you a kiss as a reward." She bent down, locking lips with the counterfeit princess, engaging in a fiery kiss right in front of the three males. The counterfeit princess's limbs convulsed violently, her cheeks withered rapidly, her flesh dissolved away, leaving behind a shriveled, skeletal corpse. Witnessing this, the maids bound by spider silk turned pale, some convulsing uncontrollably with fear, others breaking into panicked tears, terrified that they might be next. The princess was among them. She watched in horror as her personal maid perished. So it has come to this after all. When she first heard of her journey to Beijing to meet King Huai, she was filled with unease, anxiously unsure of the road ahead. There was the fear of facing the Northern King, and the ominous uncertainty of the future. Only when that mischievous young man appeared did her heart find some measure of peace, though he often teased her. His presence brought inexplicable comfort. That was why she had tentatively asked Suchan if he would abandon the princess. For the first time, she felt a dependence on a man, but his response was disappointing. And now, the princess had lost all hope. Hong Ling stepped on the barely breathing Chu Shanglong, saying, "Vice General Chu, why don't you tell me who the princess is? If you don't, I'll devour every one of these maids." Chu Shanglong gritted his teeth. "Eat them if you want. Anyway, the princess isn't here." At that moment, a voice came from the forest. "He's lying." A young man in white emerged from the trees. With hands clasped behind his back, he wore a faint smile. Jair Muha's tone was thick with sarcasm as he said, "Perfect timing. Use your tracking spell to find the princess." The white-robed sorcerer shook his head. "Impossible." Jair Muha asked, intrigued, "Is there a talisman blocking her aura?" The white-robed sorcerer chuckled. "Think about it. Wouldn't a noble princess carry a talisman for protection?" He sneered. "Try using your brains for once. Strip their clothes and jewelry. That'll reveal the princess." Hong Ling laughed coquettishly. "You sorcerers do have a way with words, but I like this idea of yours. Delicious. Go ahead and strip the so-called most beautiful woman in the kingdom. I'd love to see how noble she really is. Let's see how she compares to us mere mortals." At that moment, a voice called out from the distance, responding to the woman in red, "Probably the difference between a diamond and glass." Tianlang and his crew whipped their heads around. Dozens of feet away stood a young man with a long blade at his waist. At the sight of Suchan, the princess's dark, watery eyes suddenly lit up. When had he appeared? But almost instantly, her expression turned to worry and anxiety. Why would he throw his life away by coming here? Hong Ling scrutinized him cautiously. "So it's you. Where's Yang Yin? Where is he hiding? Are you two so fearless? How dare you walk into our trap?" Tianlang turned to ask, "Who is he?" Tang Shanjun replied in a chilling tone, "He's that silver-robed troublemaker I mentioned. Not very powerful, but incredibly tricky. He carries a Confucian scroll." The white-robed sorcerer's eyes gleamed with greed. A Confucian scroll is a precious thing. It would be extremely useful in subduing enemies. Hong Ling licked her lips and smiled. "We'll finish him within 3 breaths. No chance for him to cast spells. Otherwise, even if we grab the scroll, there won't be enough to go around." Jair Muha sneered. "Whoever takes his head gets half the spoils," announced Jair Muha with a bloodthirsty grin. "Hold on." The white-robed sorcerer interjected. "I need to see what's up with this guy first. Anyone daring enough to charge in here alone must have something up their sleeve. Maybe this is just a decoy." Hearing their discussion, the princess's heart sank. Without thinking, she screamed, "Suchan, you fool! You idiot, run!" But before she could say more, a sharp cry cut through her words. The white-robed sorcerer clutched his eyes, blood seeping through his fingers. Something had struck him, but no one could tell what it was. "Run!" he wheezed. "Take me with you." At this, Hong Ling and the others turned pale. "Something's not right with that guy," she muttered. The white-robed sorcerer had once explained that his vision spell could easily see the radiant aura of the princess from a great distance. However, trying to gaze at the soul of someone beyond his level caused severe backlash. If the target were at the 2nd rank, he would be struck blind. If the target were at the 1st rank, death would be. Now, she felt her heartbeat quicken, her skin crawling. Could that guy really be 2nd rank? Impossible. He must be carrying something on him, something tied to the 2nd rank, maybe even equal in power. Otherwise, how could he dare to face them alone? Before they could act, Suchan raised a hand. A gentle ripple of energy swept forth, causing several of them to stagger. "Stop gawking." Jair Muha bellowed. "Get him already. Don't you want the Confucian scroll?" Driven by his bloodlust, Jair Muha charged ahead. Jair Muha charged at Suchan, a wild grin on his face. Hong Mingzi turned and ran without hesitation. He wasn't as foolish as Jair Muha. Tang Shanjun was about to flee with Hong Mingzi, but then something felt wrong. He stopped and turned around, horrified. The giant Jair Muha was held fast by a crimson, gnarled arm. Jair Muha let out a blood-curdling scream, the arm radiating a dark aura, as if it had risen from the abyss. Just looking at it made Tang Shanjun dizzy. Only now did they understand why Hong Mingzi fled. Only now did they understand the white-robed sorcerer's panic. Crack, crack, bones shattered. As Jair Muha's massive body shriveled, his screams stopped. With a dismissive flick, the body was tossed aside like garbage. Suchan's lips curled into a slight smirk, as if satisfied with the performance. Wouldn't mind doing that a few more times. His gaze seemed to say. Tang Shanjun and the others dared not linger. Following Hong Mingzi's lead, they bolted into the forest. At that moment, Suchan raised his voice. "The righteous heart needs no fear. The upright man knows no retreat." A Buddhist precept. Instantly, The fleeing trio, Hong Mingze, Tianlang, and Tong Shanjun, felt their terror dissolve. Their desire to escape vanished. Unbidden, they turned back and charged at Suchan. The spell faded after 2 seconds, and fear crept back into their hearts. But it was too late. In that brief window, Suchan drew his black gold blade and hurled it forward. It pierced straight through Hong Mingze's skull, pinning her to the ground before she could react. The sight was so shocking that the remaining two felt their souls leave their bodies. Tianlang trembled, begging, "Please spare me. The Genie tribe will pledge loyalty to you." Tong Shanjun also quickly begged for mercy. It wasn't that he lacked courage. Even a formidable 4th-grade warrior felt like paper in the face of the weapon hurled by the divine scroll monk, who wouldn't be shaken by such a sight. But the monk showed no mercy. As if joking, how could anyone resist such a delicacy? Tianlang, realizing his fate, screamed in despair, "Who are you? Who on earth are you?" The monk's voice was gentle. "Suchan, Silver Gong of Dafeng." In the next moment, his head was severed. After finishing off the enemies, the divine scroll monk collected the essence blood of the 3 4th-grade warriors, leaving them as desiccated corpses. The monk returned control of the body to Suchan. Satisfied, he exhaled, "Call on me again if you face opponents like this." Suchan muttered, "Since when has the monk been so confident? The fight was no challenge at all. I barely felt the strength of these 4th grades. They fell before I could even exert myself." However, it made sense. The monk's severed arm had been sealed for 5 centuries. Deprived of nourishment for so long, it still managed to repel 4 gold gongs and Yang Qianhuan on its first use. Now that it had been nurtured within his body for half a year and strengthened by the ancient tomb's energy, defeating a few 4th grades without much effort hardly diminished the monk's dignity. Would the monk be able to handle the Northern King? That was uncertain. The Northern King was 3rd grade. The gap between 3rd and 4th grades was enormous, like comparing man to beast. Victory was not guaranteed. Suchan glanced around. Aside from the women, 2 survivors remained, Chu Shanglong and the white-robed sorcerer. Suchan walked up to Chu Shanglong, asking, "You're about to die. Any final words?" Chu Shanglong, barely alive, gazed at Suchan with cloudy eyes. "Who are you really?" Suchan said calmly, "Didn't I already tell you?" Suchan, Silver Gong of Dafeng. Chu Shanglong stared at him for a few seconds, his expression growing darker by the moment. "That wasn't your voice." Suchan remained silent, his gaze as cold as if he were looking at a corpse. Chu Shanglong rasped out, "I've always wanted to ask you something about my master." Suchan sneered. "Fake. A patchwork imitation. Incomplete and defective." Chu Shanglong's face twisted in rage. He opened his mouth to curse, but Suchan's blade was swifter. With a single motion, he beheaded him. Afterward, Suchan turned his attention to the crazed white-robed sorcerer. "What's your name? Where are you from?" But the man was beyond reasoning, his eyes streaming blood. He muttered over and over, "Run, run." Suchan sighed, exasperated. "You're really making me kill everyone." With that, he struck the sorcerer down as well. Having eliminated all the witnesses, Suchan retrieved the Confucian scroll. He used it to record ink-concealing spells, channeling his aura to ignite it. A cold wind swept through the forest, and faintly unreal shadows formed. They floated in mid-air, their faces blank and wooden. Suchan's voice was calm. "Tell me, how did you learn of the princess journey north? And why did you set up the ambush in advance?" Zalmuha's expression was vacant as he answered, "It was Su Shangzu who told us." Suchan's eyes narrowed. "Who is this Su Shangzu?" Zalmuha was forthcoming, speaking without hesitation. "He's a sorcerer." Suchan felt a jolt of alarm. Another sorcerer. He pressed further. "Why ambush the princess?" "To stop the Northern King from reaching the 2nd grade." The reply caught Suchan off guard, leaving him silent in thought. Prevent the Northern King from advancing. But how was killing the princess connected to that? Without the princess, the Northern King cannot ascend to the 2nd rank. Initially, my assumption was that the princess journey north concealed a hidden agenda. Perhaps it involved a strategic location, or some particular plan of the Northern King. And indeed, that turned out to be the case. But I never could have imagined that a mere woman could be connected to the Northern King's promotion to the 2nd rank. Suchan asked again, "What makes the princess special?" Zalmuha muttered, "Could it be true that the princess carries an exceptionally rare spiritual domain within her? Absorbing her spiritual energy could easily elevate someone to the 3rd rank." Suchan's pupils slightly contracted, sensing that Zalmuha was speaking nonsense. A warrior of the 4th rank could still be considered mortal, but the 3rd rank transcended the ordinary, an entirely different level of existence. This was a matter of a different life state, which is why the number of those transitioning from 4th to 3rd rank drops off precipitously. A mere princess facilitating such a leap? And if she truly possessed such a quality, how had she survived all these years unscathed? The allure of advancing from 4th to 3rd rank was irresistible, not just for the northern tribes. Even the fourth-ranked masters of the capital would be unable to resist such a temptation. Suchan voiced this doubt. How did the northern tribes learn of the princess' uniqueness? Zalmuha answered truthfully. Su Shangzu told us. Suchan sighed inwardly, then turned to Hong Ling. Do you know any other inside information? The alluring woman, her gaze vacant, muttered. Our master covets the princess. He ordered me to ambush her. I was jealous and asked him what made the princess so special. He said she carried spiritual energy. He also recited a verse. Born to stun the world and silence the sages, graceful as the setting sun, lauded as a national treasure, a beauty to charm even the emperor. Suchan was taken aback. Isn't that the verse Fu Xiang once told me about? Supposedly written when the princess was just a girl, considered a genius by an abbot at a certain temple, and given a poem in his honor. There's no doubt about this poem. It's been passed down extensively. Or perhaps, there is a deeper meaning behind this poem. Most people don't know. I'll ask Dean Zhao when I return to the capital. Most of the mysteries are now solved. The Prince of Zhenbei wants to advance to the second rank, so he needs the Princess Consort's domain to help him break through the final layer. Emperor Yuanjing and Chu Shanglong are on guard against Defeng, the enemies within the court. Someone doesn't want the Prince of Zhenbei to advance to the second rank, but because of Lord Su and the mysterious sorcerer behind him, the Manchus have become aware of this. As a result, they set up an ambush in advance and captured the Princess Consort. So now we have a situation where the attackers far outmatch the escorts. In other words, the enemies in the court have yet to make their move. No. They've already made their move. Former Assistant Minister Zhou Xianping led the tax silver case, and there was a mysterious sorcerer involved in the tax silver case. This case tells me that the mysterious sorcerer behind the case is controlled by a faction within the court. Zhou Xianping is the evidence. There are traitors within the court who are colluding with the Manchus in the north because they are connected by a mysterious sorcerer. Damn it. Sorcerers are all shady characters. Jianzheng is plotting in the shadows, and so is the mysterious sorcerer, each one more insidious than the other. Wait, Jianzheng must know about this sorcerer's existence. Su Qian's face turned slightly dazed as he opened his mouth. A thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. Jianzheng is in a game of wits with this mysterious sorcerer. Everyone is a pawn between the two of them, including me and the divine arts. Su Qian exhaled slowly. He decided to set aside the matter of Jianzheng and the mysterious sorcerer for now. That would be something to deal with in the future. But it's not something he can influence right now. A wife has her own advantages. She can grow through the knight's offerings. When he has enough strength in the future, he will overturn this chessboard. But before that, he must keep a low profile and draw nutrients from other sources. Relying solely on the knight's offerings would never allow him to grow strong enough to flip the board. Su Qian then asked about the main objective of this operation. The 3000 Li Bloody Trail. Was that your Manchu doing? Jar Muha remained blank-faced, answering in a flat tone. What 3000 Li Bloody Trail? Su Qian frowned, then rephrased, the slaughter of Defeng along the 3000 Li border. Was that your Manchu doing? Jar Muha stared blankly into the distance, as if he genuinely didn't. Su Qian's breathing grew heavier, and he took a deep breath, then asked Tang Shanjun the same question. He got the same answer. Even this black peppercorn had no knowledge of it. Su Qian felt bewildered. What the hell is going on? Does no one really know? Su Qian's breathing turned heavy again. He asked bluntly, Chu Shanglong, do you know the true nature of the 3000 Li Bloody Trail? Chu replied dully. Wei Yuan tried to frame Prince Huai, using a corpse and a soul as evidence. Then he dispatched Yin Luo and Su Qian to the border, attempting to fabricate charges against Prince Huai. Su Qian mentally denied it 3 times. No, I didn't. That's not true. Stop talking nonsense. But this was Chu Shanglong's perspective. He believed the so-called 3000 Li Bloody Trail was a plot by Wei Gong and the court officials, targeting the Prince of Zhenbei. They countered it by using the envoy mission to escort the Princess Consort. That being said, Emperor Yuanjing likely had the same idea. He went with the flow. In that case, Emperor Yuanjing and the Prince of Zhenbei are on the same side. After all, they are brothers from the same mother. Neither the northern Manchus nor the demons know about the 3000, but the deputy general of the Prince of Zhenbei, Chu Shanglong, believes this is a frame-up by Wei Gong and the court officials. In other words, he also doesn't know about the 3000 Li Bloody Trail. So who is the real traitor? The case has suddenly become murky. Su Qian inexplicably felt a sense of relief. He then asked, when you return to the north, how will you deal with me? Chu Shanglong answered bluntly, surveillance or house arrest. After some time, we'll send you back to the capital. Su Qian followed up, what kind of person do you think? Chu Shanglong replied without hesitation, dominant and strong-willed. He treats his brothers very well, a lord worthy of loyalty. Su Qian posed a controversial question. Do you think the Prince of Zhenbei would rebel? Chu Shanglong carefully replied, I don't think so. Prince Huai is a natural leader. He enjoys the battlefield, not the court. Prince Huai is a warrior. His heart is set on the battlefield and cultivation. Suchan reluctantly accepted this explanation. The throne is but not everyone wants to sit on it. If Prince Huai really is a warrior, then the throne would only be a constraint for him. He stopped asking questions, lowered his hands slightly, and started a new round of brainstorming. There are still two things I don't understand. The first is, if the princess was so valuable, why did Emperor Yuanjing gift her to the Prince of Zhenbei, instead of keeping her for himself? Secondly, even though Emperor Yuanjing and Prince Huai are brothers, with the emperor's suspicious nature, it's unlikely he'd fully trust the Prince of Zhenbei. Suchan turned to the sorcerer and tentatively asked, "What about you? What's your name?" The sorcerer, muttering to himself, still managed to answer the question. "My name is Su Shangzu." Disappointment surged in Suchan's heart. "So you're Su Shangzu. I thought you might be the mastermind behind all this." This guy used a forgotten technique to spy on the divine book, driving the monks into madness. This means his rank is low, and it's easy to deduce that he has backing from an organization or a master. Suchan continued asking, "What organization do you rely on? Who do you serve?" But he got only silence in return. Then he kept repeating, "My name is Su Shangzu." Suchan's lips twitched. This is completely uncommunicative. Aside from stating his name, he couldn't answer any other questions. It was like dealing with a 3-year-old. I remember there's a sachet in the fragments of the Imperial Book. When Wei Yuan accused the Prince of Zhenbei, used the sachet in court. Afterward, the sachet was returned to Suchan, and he kept it, forgetting to return it to the Tianzong Saintess. This sachet was a small artifact refined by Li Miaozhen herself. It had the ability to preserve souls and trap spirits. Normal ghosts wouldn't be able to break free from its constraints. Suchan placed the sorcerers and other souls into the sachet together. Although the sorcerer had become incapacitated, the dignified Tianzong Saintess certainly had the means to restore the soul's sanity. He collected the other souls as well, hoping for a future surprise. Suchan couldn't help but remark, "This is the privilege of a successful sea king. Even a rough warrior could have plenty of tricks and resources. Other warriors didn't get such treatment." In the end, Suchan, uncertain how to handle these secrets, felt troubled. They were just ordinary people who had been innocently swept up in this disaster. Waking them too soon would interfere with future plans, so he had no choice but to let them spend the night in the wilderness. Come morning, they'd each go their own way. The morning breeze was cool, but as soon as the sunlight appeared, it chased away the previous night's chill. Elder Aunt Chenshin had a good sleep and felt completely refreshed. Weary from his efforts, he hadn't slept well for days. His body was weighed down by fatigue, and he needed a sound, deep sleep like this. But then he woke up abruptly, his gaze momentarily blank. Before his pupils regained focus, the once pampered woman sprang to her feet in one swift motion. A wave of panic washed over her. "I was captured by that clan, wasn't I? Where am I?" The young man sitting by the campfire tossed her a water pouch, his tone gentle. "You're awake. If you're thirsty, drink up. In a little while, the rabbit meat will be ready." Memories from just before she lost consciousness flashed quickly through her mind. Her eyes widened as she stared in disbelief at Suchan. "You saved me? Impossible." Suchan didn't have the power for that. "Who are you really? Why are you pretending to be him? How is he doing now?" Suchan looked at her and smiled faintly. A reasonable suspicion. Her brain isn't entirely dull. The young man added, "The first time we met was near the southern arena at the Nine Dragons. I picked up your silver, and you angrily demanded it back. You even threw money at me in frustration. The second time we met was also by the southern arena. I risked danger to protect you, but you hit me instead." There was a dull thud. The water pouch dropped to the ground. The woman stared blankly at the young man by the campfire. After a long pause, she murmured, "It's really you. We're safe now." Suchan nodded. "I used all my strength to save you. As for the others, I couldn't do anything." The woman's ordinary face revealed a complex expression. Her features turned sorrowful as she softly said, "I see. I didn't expect you to risk your life to save me. This insignificant secret. The princess, she's dead." Suchan, unfazed, replied, "Dead is dead. A woman who causes such chaos is better off gone. Her death isn't the end of it all. Good riddance." A round of applause for her death. The woman's eyes widened, and she glared at Suchan. "What nonsense are you spouting? You didn't even know the princess. How can you speak of her like that? Besides, how was she a blight on the kingdom? She was just a pitiable woman." Suchan chuckled. "Then tell me, in what way was she pitiable?" The woman turned her head away angrily, lifting her fair chin. "You're just a rough warrior. What would you know about her suffering?" "I'm not telling you." Now that she was safe, her haughty demeanor resurfaced, timid, cowardly, yet proud. Suchan casually waved a piece of roasted meat, saying, "The bunny's ready. Want some?" The woman sat on the side hugging her knees, keeping her distance from Suchan. She wasn't planning to respond to him, but in the end, she couldn't resist the lure of the food. Her mouth watered as she inched closer, and when he wasn't looking, She grabbed the roasted meat from Suchan's hands, and she eagerly took a bite. Even though the steaming hot meat burned her mouth, she reluctantly spit it out, gasping as she tried to cool down her lips. Suchan had seasoned the rabbit meat with chicken essence, masking its gamey taste and enhancing the flavor. Combined with Suchan's perfect roasting, she who usually disliked strong flavors, ended up gnawing the rabbit legs clean. After she'd eaten her fill, she sighed contentedly. I didn't think I'd sink so low. Feeling happy over a few bites of rabbit meat, Suchan thought she was utterly amusing. Your ingratitude, he said, is just like my own in my calmer moments. An interesting woman. His eyes suddenly landed on her snow-white wrist, and he casually remarked, that Bodhi bead bracelet is quite interesting. Let me have a look. The woman's face turned pale. She hastily pulled her sleeves over it, hiding the bracelet, and laughed awkwardly. What's there to see? It's just a cheap trinket. But Suchan reached out directly for her wrist. Let me have a look, he said. It's no big deal. She was taken aback. Is it right for a man to just touch my hand so casually? Let go, she cried. But Suchan held on, pulling her closer. Just a quick look, that's all. She struggled wildly, screaming, no, no. But amidst her desperate cries, the bracelet slipped off her pale wrist. At that moment, the plain-looking older woman in Suchan's eyes transformed as if a reflection in water, revealing her true appearance. Her original beauty, her captivating features, were like a painting, sparkling under the firelight's glow, radiant and mesmerizing. Suchan had seen many beauties before, and he knew the prince of Jinbei's wife was known as the most beautiful woman, Defeng. However, seeing the legendary beauty in person, Suchan couldn't help but feel a strong sense of awe. A verse surfaced in his mind. Clouds imagine her clothes, flowers imagine her face. A spring breeze reveals a blooming beauty, if not seen on Mount Jade, perhaps glimpsed beneath the moon on the Yao Terrace. The princess shyly raised her head, her lashes quivering slightly. Her lips were full and red, like the most tempting cherries, inviting one's gaze and thoughts. With a voice tinged with sobs and pleading, she said, give it back to me. Suchan silently looked at her, and decided not to tease her further. He handed the bracelet back. Even so, he couldn't help but curse under his breath. Damn it! You've seen so many beauties, Suchan. Why are you still stunned like some amateur? I have to admit, although my own fish pond is top-notch, it still falls short in comparison to the first beauty of Defeng. The princess put the bracelet back on, and once again her appearance shifted, as if rippling water, transforming back into a plain older woman. She touched her face, feeling a bit alarmed. Revealing my true self in front of someone like Suchan, this lecture could have been the death of me. I need to stay in my old woman disguise to avoid any unwanted advances. However, Suchan suddenly seemed uneasy, because in his eyes the princess hadn't turned back into an old woman, but she clearly had the artifact on her again. Why can I still see her true form? Could it be that by touching that artifact, I've seen through the disguise? Suchan suddenly chuckled a few times. Well, this isn't bad. This trip will be more pleasant if I don't have to keep staring at a granny. The princess felt uncomfortable, hearing his shameless laughter. She nervously asked, what are you laughing at? Nothing, Suchan replied, smiling. Just thinking that it's been about 10 days since we left the capital. You must be tired of pretending to be a maid. I'm getting tired of pretending too. The princess stared at him in shock. What do you mean? Suchan continued laughing. That night on the deck, I wanted to take your bracelet off, but I didn't want to complicate things. I'm the officer in charge, after all, and I had to think about the bigger picture. The princess froze, gaping at him in astonishment. You knew I was the princess, back then? No way. I was so sure my disguise was perfect. I even patted myself on the back for acting like a flawless maid. I thought no one had figured it out, Suchan said with no emotion. To be accurate, I started suspecting your true identity when you threw gold at me in the palace. Later, when we met on the closed boat, I realized you were the princess, and the person on the ship was just a puppet. The princess opened her mouth, but no words came out. Was I exposed that early? Thinking back on her behavior, she felt a wave of shame so strong. She wished she could dig a hole and bury herself. Suchan reassured her, saying, I'm telling you this to let you know. Although I'm fond of beauty, which man isn't? I would never force a woman. We still have a ways to go on our journey north, and I need your full cooperation. The princess bit her lip, looking a bit downcast. So, she thought, she still couldn't escape the fate of heading north. She fell silent, then after a moment asked, when will we meet up with the delegation? The young officer raised his head, his lips curling, into a subtle, enigmatic smile. Who said we'd be meeting up with the delegation? After some time, the delegation reached the capital, arriving at a city called Wanzhou. The governor's name was Nyo, and he wore silk-embroidered robes. He greeted them saying, I didn't know you were coming, my lords. I would have come to meet you. May I ask what brings you here? A Dali temple official presented a prepared document, saying, We're on our way to Beijing to investigate a case. This is our travel permit. After exchanging a few polite words, Governor Niu carefully examined the document. After reading it, his expression turned grim and somewhat incredulous. He scanned the group and cautiously asked, "May I ask who among you is Suin Luo?" A ministry officer sadly replied. The delegation was ambushed on the way, and Suin Luo was gravely injured protecting everyone. We've sent him back to the capital for treatment. Niu Zhizhou turned pale with fright. Good heavens! What kind of villains dare ambush the imperial delegation? They're utterly lawless. The censor surnamed Lu waved dismissively. No need to dwell on it, Governor Niu. We've come here to investigate a case, and we have some questions about the situation in Chujo. Niu Zhizhou sighed. Last year, heavy snow blanketed the north, causing countless deaths. This spring, invaders have been repeatedly crossing the border, looting and pillaging along the way. Fortunately, the Prince of Jinbei's troops are numerous and capable, and we haven't lost a single city. The Manchus don't dare venture deeply into Chujo, but the people living near the border have suffered greatly. Not all of them live within the safety of city walls. The ones targeted by the Manchus are the villagers and small townsfolk. The ministry's chief constable frowned. Where exactly did the 3000 Li blood trail occur? Niu Zhizhou exclaimed. That's pure fantasy. Gentlemen, you must understand. Chujo's total length is only about 8,000 li. If such a massacre truly took place, how could I still be standing here talking to you? Censor Lu sneered. We're all learned men here, Governor Niu. Don't play dumb. The 3000 Li blood trail is a metaphor, a reference from ancient times in the Warring States period. A general once vowed to exact vengeance and led his army on a 3000 Li march, destroying the enemy nation. Later generations used it as a metaphor to describe large-scale massacres and cold-blooded slaughter. Niu Zhizhou repeatedly protested. I truly don't know. Wanzhou is several days' journey from the northern border. If you don't believe me, why not travel further north to see for yourselves? Censor Lu scoffed. The delegation has its own itinerary. No need for Governor Niu to concern himself. With that, he dismissed Niu Zhizhou. There was no point in further questioning. Niu Zhizhou, and likely uninformed. Once Niu Zhizhou had climbed into his carriage and left with his men, the Dali Temple official looked around at everyone. What do you all think? Should we continue heading north, or stay at the station for a few more days? Let's stay at the station. The people from Huaiwang will surely come looking for the case. When that happens, we'll have no choice but to head north with them. Another censor, surnamed Zhou, laughed and said, Isn't that perfect? We operate openly while Su patrols the shore, drawing Huaiwang's attention as part of our mission. Constable Chun nodded in agreement. I also think we should rest for a few days. Soon, Yang Yin joined them and informed the three officials of the details. Su Qian planned to travel alone, secretly heading to the capital to investigate. This plan received unanimous support, and they all promised to keep it secret. The officials' cooperation was due to two reasons. First, they owed Su Qian their lives from his recent rescue, and their attitude had shifted from disdain to respect. Second, Su Qian's covert investigation meant the delegation could slack off, avoiding any discoveries that might provoke the Prince of Jinbei. It was a win-win situation. At that moment, one of the censors sighed. I wonder what has become of the princess and Chu Shanglong. Are they alive or dead? The Dali Temple official said indifferently, Their lives or deaths have nothing to do with us. If they hadn't secretly snuck into the delegation, we wouldn't have fallen into an ambush, and then they fled during the battle, leaving us to fend for ourselves. Such treacherous scum are better off dead. Yang Yin, aside from revealing Su Qian's whereabouts, shared no other information with the delegation, but based on they deduced that Su Qian had escaped, the princess, carrying a treasure, and the enemy experts entering Daifeng territory couldn't afford to be too blatant. Thus, their safe retreat was highly probable. In addition, Yang Yin quietly assigned 10 soldiers to escort the maid back to the capital. This weakened the delegation's security detail, but the Dali Temple officials didn't notice at all, as they never paid attention to the lower ranks, and had no idea of the exact numbers. On a narrow mountain path trodden by travelers, Su Qian strode ahead confidently, while the princess lagged behind, walking at a slower pace. She started complaining, Can we rest already? I'm exhausted. Su Qian stopped and turned back, smiling. Not bad at all. You've kept up so far. Your stamina has really improved over the past few days. I hear water up ahead. Push a little further and we'll rest there. The princess's eyes lit up, but then dimmed. She dared not bathe. First, she was afraid Su Qian might spy on her, or suddenly get inappropriate ideas, and do something outrageous. Second, as long as she stayed unwashed and smelly, this guy wouldn't touch her. Su Qian, not bothering with her, walked straight to the pool. He nonchalantly and skillfully removed his gear, revealing his toned upper body, with well-defined and proportionate muscles. The sight was the epitome of male vigor. With a splash, He dove into the water, completely ignoring the woman nearby. The princess rolled her eyes and turned away, but couldn't resist glancing back occasionally. She wanted to bathe too. But for now she had to endure it. She sat on a rock to the west, slowly removing her grimy embroidered shoes. A pair of small, delicate feet emerged. She examined her sole with several blisters. The princess pouted, close to tears. Although Suchan, the lustful rascal, was captivated by her beauty and had been relatively gentle, not rushing the journey, the past 5 days of walking were still grueling for a pampered princess. It had been an arduous trek. She dipped her pale feet into the stream. The cool water washed over her ankles, and she closed her eyes, savoring the relief. Her crescent-shaped eyes showed she was enjoying it. Then she noticed something in the distance near the pool. At some point, Suchan had come out of the water. He was standing at the pool's edge with his back to her, one hand on his hip and the other holding something between his legs. A shimmering stream of water arced gracefully and merged into the pool. The princess let out a devastated scream. Su Mingyan. 3 days later, a large group of armored soldiers marched into Wano City, heading directly for the government office, all of them wearing expressions of arrogance. One glance at their bearing was enough to tell they were military. The lead officer asked loudly, "Where is the princess? What about Deputy General Chu?" The Dali Temple official frowned. "Who are you?" The lead officer replied coldly, "Li Yuanhua, Assistant General of Chujo's Rapid Strike Battalion." "You are?" "Answer my question." "We received a secret order from Prince Huai's spies. We're here to inquire about the princess's whereabouts." He turned abruptly to the relay station and stopped the delegation preparing to head north. The Dali Temple official answered firmly, "I'm the Dali Temple deputy from the delegation. We were ambushed on the road, and both Chu Shanglong and the princess are missing." Li Yuanhua's eyes widened. "An ambush in Defeng territory? Who could be so bold? What's the motive?" But he quickly regained his composure, turning his gaze to a cloaked figure behind them, whose identity was unknown. The figure, wearing a bronze mask, said coolly, "I have questions for you all, but one at a time." The constable asked in confusion, "Who are you?" Before the figure could reply, Yang Yen stepped in. "She's a spy for Prince Huai, a renowned intelligence agent. Her reputation precedes her in the capital. She's at least 6th or 5th rank." The cloaked figure turned away, walking off. But before leaving, she ordered, "Come with me." Inside the room, the cloaked woman placed a token on the table and said, "The room is soundproof. I have a few questions for you." "Who are you?" The constable answered straightforwardly, "Chen Liang, Chief Constable of the Ministry of Justice." The cloaked woman continued her questioning. "Do you know the princess's true identity?" Chen Liang gave her a puzzled look. "What true identity?" The cloaked woman appeared momentarily stunned, then shifted the topic. "Tell me about your journey after leaving the capital." Chen Liang recounted how the delegation had departed, how Suchan had deduced that an ambush might occur, and described the subsequent battle. The cloaked woman asked, "Suchan, he accurately predicted that the delegation would be ambushed at Lu's Beach?" Chen Liang nodded firmly. Su Inlua's investigatives, this kind of deduction is trivial for him. The cloaked woman continued, "After the Buddhist duel, did anything unusual happen to Suchan? Because of the geographical distance between the capital and the north, news of the post-duel imperial examinations, the martial arts trial, and the Heavenman dispute hadn't reached here. The Beijing spies not knowing was understandable. Thus, Chen Liang explained these major events in detail. For the first time, the cloaked woman's expression shifted. Finally, she nodded. "I see. Call in the Dali Temple official." When everyone was present, the cloaked woman asked, "After you were ambushed, why did you continue heading north? Instead of searching for the princess?" The Dali Temple official sneered. "Why linger on those who abandon us? Our mission is to investigate the 3000 Li blood trail case, not to escort the princess, so her disappearance has nothing to do with us." The cloaked woman's tone grew colder, and she said irritably, "You may leave." But as the Dali Temple official turned to go, the cloaked woman spoke again. "What's your opinion of Suchan?" The Dali Temple official's face remained cold. "Just a yellow-haired brat." With that, he slammed the door and left. He seemed genuinely unimpressed with Suchan, and equally unimpressed with this northern spy. The cloaked woman's eyes flickered with thought. What she was contemplating was unclear. In the main hall outside, Chen Liang arranged paper, ink, and brushes on the table. Chen Liang picked up a brush, dipped it in ink, and wrote, "Right hand is hiding something." After finishing, he remained silent, and handed the brush to the Dali Temple official who had just come down the stairs. The Dali Temple official, still relatively young and energetic in the bureaucracy, sat quietly at the table, picked up the brush, and wrote on the paper, "Not a sorcerer." Then 2 censors entered the room to speak with the cloaked woman's spy. When they came out, one wrote, "Didn't ask about the case." The other wrote, "Very interested in Su Inluo." Yang Yen glanced at the paper, not appearing particularly surprised. He nodded faintly in acknowledgement. then went upstairs to find the cloaked woman, casually crumpling the paper in his hand, and with a slight force, reducing it to fine powder. When Yang Yin directly opened the door and entered, the cloaked woman stated, "The princess is missing. You night watchmen bear primary responsibility." Yang Yin paid her no heed, coldly replying, "If you have something to say, just say it." The cloaked woman nodded slowly. "Fine, I'll be direct. Where is the princess?" Instead of answering, Yang Yin countered with a question of his own, his gaze falling on her right shoulder. "What's in your right hand?" The cloaked woman raised the hand she had kept hidden under the table. In her hand was a small bronze plate. "Impressive, Chief Constable," she admitted. "You saw through my little This artifact from the four heaven swords can discern lies from truth. However, for a peak 4th rank sorceress, determining whether you're lying requires a 6th rank sorcerer." Yang Yin ignored the bronze plate and answered her initial question. "I don't know where the princess is." The cloaked woman's second question followed immediately. "Where is Suchan? Is it true he was injured and returned to the capital?" Yang Yin replied flatly, "I am not obligated to cooperate with your investigation. Answer my question, and I'll answer yours." Beneath her cloak and mask, her deep eyes stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she said, "You asked the question, Yang Yin. Get straight to the point. Why would the Manchus target the princess?" The cloaked woman did not reply, but the cold gaze she cast was answer enough. Yang Yin nodded and rephrased his question. "Was Chu Shanglong insistent on taking the water route that day because he was waiting to meet with you?" The cloaked woman nodded, giving a positive response. She then asked, "Where is Suchan?" Yang Yin shook his head. "I don't know." The cloaked woman was taken aback. "You don't know? Then he didn't return to the capital gravely injured?" Yang Yin asked. "Why didn't the spies escort the delegation from the start, and instead waited at the Chu state border?" The cloaked woman responded, "We have our own enemies." She then asked, "Did Lord Wei know about the princess's journey north?" Yang Yin shrugged, nodded, and said, "Lord Wei knew." The cloaked woman fell silent for a long time. Finally, she left. Alone, she headed to the assault troops camp station outside Wanzhou. She rested in one of the tents. By nightfall, another cloaked figure entered the tent. With a hoarse, low voice, he said, "I just returned from Jiangzhou City. I found 2 sites of fierce battles, and confirmed traces of Golden Timber Walker and Pig." In the same low tone, the female spy responded, "I gathered intelligence from the delegation. It involved Red Spirit and Tang Mountain Lord, as well as Zarmuha, but not the leader of Golden Timber Walker, Sirius." Still, the delegation faced a frontal assault. It's possible that Sirius from Golden Timber Walker struck from behind. That would make it 4 4th rank fighters involved. In that case, Chu Shanglong must be in dire straits. The delegation also said that Chu Shanglong fled with the princess. The male spy was momentarily stunned. He asked, "He ran off alone with the princess, abandoning the delegation? The other soldiers scattered with the maidservants? He's not the soft-hearted type. Then it's clear. The princess he was with is a fake." That move was incredibly foolish. Running away with a maid in such a dangerous situation. Wasn't it clearly announcing to others that the princess was hiding among the maids? However, this also indirectly indicates Chu Shanglong's extreme mistrust of the delegation. He would rather risk exposing the princess just to escape first. From his perspective, he likely believed the delegation would be wiped out. The female spy nodded, intervening. To stop Tang Shanjun and Zarmuha was Suchan, she said, and his true strength is about 6th rank. She then recounted Suchan's recent exploits. The hoarse-voiced male spy said, "Confucian spellbooks." Chu Shanglong likely didn't expect Suchan to survive so spectacularly. If he had known it was possible, he wouldn't have run. But as things stand, our current assumption is that the princess is very likely in Manchu hands now. He continued grimly. "It doesn't look good for her. However, I still feel it's not so bad. If the Manchus were willing to deploy 4 4th ranks, they must have known about the princess's special significance. So they would first take the princess back north, split territories, or be promised huge rewards. Now, what must be done is to inform Prince Huai and conduct a full-scale search in Jiangzhou and Chuzhou to intercept them before they return." At this point, he looked at the female spy. "Do you have anything to add?" The female spy nodded. "The lead investigator, Suchan, hasn't left the capital. He's secretly heading north. As for where exactly, Yang Yin claims not to know, but I think they must have a special method of communication." The male spy countered, "How can you be so sure?" The female spy explained, "Suchan is tasked with investigating the Blood Path 3,000 miles case. He fears offending Prince Huai, and he fears being monitored, so he used the delegation as a cover. Secretly investigating was the best approach. With his sharp mind, it would be unreasonable if he didn't do this. Moreover, the delegation was rife with internal discord. The 3 civil officials all disliked him." The male spy sneered, "Don't underestimate these civil officials. They might just be putting on a show for you." The female spy paused, then added, "When Wei Yuan learned about the princess's northern capture by the Manchus, was he involved in this?" The man laughed derisively and turned away. Don't ask me. Wei Qingyi's thoughts are beyond our grasp, but he couldn't help suggesting, it wouldn't hurt to spread. Once he's found, keep him under close watch. Inside the delegation, the focus should be on monitoring Yang Yan's movements. As for the civil officials, you decide what to do. The next morning, the princess, wrapped in Su Qian's robe, woke up in the cliffside cave. She saw Su Qian squatting at the cave entrance, holding a wooden basin he'd somehow conjured up, his entire body submerged in it. The princess groggily rubbed her eyes, still half asleep as she looked over. Su Ningyan, what are you doing? Su Qian spent a long moment massaging his face, then finally turned around. But the face that met her eyes was not Su Qian's. It was Su Erling. Su New Year. The princess, taken by surprise, let out a sharp scream. Her lively, expressive eyes widened as she stammered. Why you? Su Erling? Are you a ghost? What are you doing here? Su Qian snorted smugly, mocking her reaction. I'm Su Qian. This is my face-changing. Even the most powerful martial artist wouldn't see through it. Once we reach a village, you and I will both change clothes. The princess seemed stunned, staring blankly at Su New Year's face. She was so dazed that she just stared at him unblinkingly. But everything about the disguise was perfect, no flaws at all. Hearing the familiar voice, the princess consort suddenly felt reassured. Hui looked at him. Why did you turn into your cousin? Su Qian looked at the princess consort, speechless. This woman really had no brain. Perhaps it was because she had been strutting around in Prince Huai's manor alone, and had grown used to not having any rivals in the household, just like her aunt. And then, she said irritably, are you stupid? Can I enter the city with my original face? This is basic counter-surveillance awareness. The princess consort pouted. Counter what? Random nonsense. I don't understand. I'm hungry, Su Qian ordered. Zhou, it's done. Outside, there's a freshly hunted pheasant. Go clean it and roast it. The princess consort nodded, then obediently went to work. During this time, she had learned how to prepare game and roast it from start to finish. Of course, this was all on Su Qian's orders. The princess consort was used to being bossed around by him. After all, one must bow under someone else's roof. Of course, the princess consort was also a sly woman. She never confronted Su Qian head-on, often seeking revenge in private. For example, while he was bathing, she would hide his clothes, leaving him fuming in the water. Or, she would smear bird droppings from leaves onto the game, then roast it for him to eat. Recently, she was considering spitting on the roasted game. After spitting for a while, the princess consort slyly smiled. She turned back and called out to Su Qian. It's done roasting. I'll have porridge. Su Qian, of course, knew her tricks. He calmly remarked, not bad. I've already had porridge. You can have the roasted chicken. The princess consort froze, wondering, did he figure it out? She timidly asked, why? All this time, you've always had the chicken while I've had porridge. Su Qian narrowed his eyes and questioned, why don't you want to eat it? Or are you spitting bird droppings into the chicken again? The princess consort grabbed the roasted chicken and brought it close to him, begrudgingly saying, stop imagining the worst. How could you judge me with such petty thinking? Just look for yourself. Where are the bird droppings? Su Qian nodded. All right then, no bird droppings. Good, then you can eat it. The princess consort's expression froze in shock. She hesitated and weakly said, I'm not feeling hungry today. I don't feel like eating meat. Su Qian moved closer to her, almost like he was about to kiss her. Suppressing his tone, he said coldly, this wild chicken was hard-earned by me. Don't waste food, or I'll be angry. The princess consort's face darkened, her heart almost skipping a beat. After finishing his words, Su Qian suddenly felt a strange sensation. After several days, someone finally sent a message in the Earthly Uncle chat group. He quickly stood and walked aside, not forgetting to add one last threat. Finish it quickly. If you don't eat it, I'll leave you here as tiger bait. Su Qian stared at the Earthly Uncle fragment. A small line of text appeared on the jade fragment. It was a message from Li Miaozhen. Taoist Golden Lotus, please block everyone else. After a few moments, Li Miaozhen's message came again. Su Qian, have you arrived in the capital? Su Qian used his finger as a pen and typed, I'll reach the capital today. Have you found any new information? Li Miaozhen replied, I'm investigating the blood map, 3000 Li. I think it's too big of a deal to stay hidden for long. But let me tell you, Su Qian, this case is really strange. I flew along the Chujo border for 3 days and nights, but I haven't located the blood map, 3000 Li yet. However, I did notice something odd. I came across a small group of Manchu cavalry on the border. I killed them, summoned their souls, and questioned them. They had no knowledge of the blood map, 3000 Li. Su Qian typed back, I'm aware of that. This case isn't as straightforward as it seems. Also, blood map 3000 Li is a reference, not an actual 3000 Li journey. Sister, you should read more books. Li Miaozhen was. You already knew that? I'm not surprised. Su Qian sighed and said, it's not as deep as you think. I'm just like you, killing and summoning souls. It's just that you killed me. And I killed a Manchu leader. He continued to ask if she had found anything else. Li Miaozhen replied, I found that everything in Chujo is very cheap, whether it's staying at an inn or eating, or buying other items. 5 taels of silver can last a long time. But in the capital of Dafeng, 5 taels of silver vanish in an instant. Suchan was confused. Miaozhen, I don't quite understand your point. Li Miaozhen explained. Usually, when a region experiences war, the prices of grain and other goods spike. But I checked several counties in Chujo, and while there were fluctuations, the differences weren't significant. Suchan understood. What you mean is that Chujo's prices are still stable. This indicates that although the Manchus invaded the border, burning, killing, and looting, the impact was confined to a relatively small area. Li Miaozhen replied, I'm beginning to wonder if Blood Map 3000 Li is even real. I don't know how to investigate further. Her doubts weren't entirely unfounded. The case of Blood Map 3000 Li began with a broken soul, a soul whose identity and origins were unknown. When you think about it, the decisions by Duke Wei, the imperial court, Zhugong, and the remote jurisdictions seemed a bit too rash. But if Blood Map 3000 Li doesn't exist, then how do you explain the broken soul? That corpse was discovered by Li Miaozhen by chance. If she hadn't been a Taoist disciple who knew how to summon spirits, the soul would have dispersed in a few days. So the possibility of a staged event is low. That deceased individual was from the north. Because of the Blood Map 3000 Li affair, he traveled thousands of miles to the capital to present a grievance. But just 80 li from the capital, he was intercepted and killed. He died an unnatural death. Suchan pondered for a long time. Honestly, I don't have any particularly great ideas. I just wonder if answering like this might make me appear less majestic in Li Miaozhen's eyes. Suddenly, he had a thought. He sent a message. Miaozhen, the body you found by the roadside, it was a Jianghu figure, wasn't it? Have you considered that if something this serious were happening in Beijing, who would be the first to report it? There's no need to guess. It would be Beijing officials dealing with the blood map case, and the local officials within the 3000 Li region. So why is it that what you found is the body of a Jianghu figure instead? Li Miaozhen replied stubbornly. There are often noble souls in the martial world. A Jianghu person seeing the tragedy, feeling enraged, and going to Beijing to present a grievance isn't unusual, right? Suchan laughed and replied, if that were the case, then he wouldn't have been intercepted and killed. No one would pay attention to a nobody from the martial world, even if he reached the capital. With no evidence, his grievance would go nowhere. A commoner without proof can't accuse a prince. Trust me, no one in the court would care. Li Miaozhen immediately responded. So you're suggesting that local officials might have had a report, but something went wrong. So they sent that hero to the capital. He might have been carrying some sort of token, which is why he was intercepted and killed. As she analyzed this, Li Miaozhen suddenly felt a moment of clarity. Her train of thought was clear. Actually, I had some thoughts too, but they weren't clear. He made me think it through. Li Miaozhen reflexively sent another message. So what should I investigate next? But as soon as she sent it, she regretted it, thinking to herself, Li Miaozhen, you really lack independence. This makes you seem like a helpless woman, like you rely on him for everything. Suchan replied, actually, it's very simple. Conceal your identity as the heavenly sect saintess, and act as the flying swallow heroine in Chujo's martial world. It's best to perform more chivalrous deeds. Li Miaozhen felt a spark of inspiration. Do you mean? Suchan transmitted. We've been overlooking who was behind the roadside corpse. Whoever sent that Jianghu figure must have encountered trouble, prompting them to rely on someone from the martial world to relay the message. If that person is still alive, they're likely hiding somewhere, waiting quietly. They wouldn't approach the envoy delegation. Once the delegation enters Beijing, they'd be closely monitored. Prince Huai's people might even use the envoy as bait. Compared to that, I think they'd seek out a highly respected martial artist. This is supported by the dead hero's background. Of course, all of this assumes that the person higher up the chain is still alive. Li Miaozhen's eyes lit up. Right, how could I not think of that before? You really are impressive. She transmitted back. Got it. I'll contact you once I have a lead. Suchan replied immediately, sure. I have one more question. If someone loses their sanity and rationality before death, and we can't communicate with their spirit afterward, is there a way to recover it? If so, how long would it take? Li Miaozhen replied, is the soul intact? Suchan transmitted, all 3 parts of the soul are intact. That day, Suchan took away the corpses of the Manchu warriors and the white-robed sorcerer. It was so the white-robed sorcerer's soul could be fully restored after 7 days. After 7, the human soul would emerge from the body, merging with the heaven and earth spirits outside. At that point, the spirit would regain clarity, becoming indistinguishable from its living state. Li Miaozhen calmly responded, no problem, it's just a matter of a few days. Suchan breathed a sigh of relief. This matter isn't urgent. We'll discuss it after we regroup. The princess consort walked over with a big smile, but she still looked rather forced. She cheerfully said, I'm done eating. Suchan remained calm. They walked side by side along the mountain path. Actually, he had heard the sound of the princess consort throwing away the roasted chicken, but he couldn't be bothered to expose her. After all, he wasn't the one who'd go hungry. Suchan's thoughts began to wander. He found himself curious about who this princess consort really was. How could she have such a spiritual presence? The Tang monk of Dafeng? If that's the case, then I'm Sun Wukong, the master whom I, old son, protect. By evening, they arrived at Sanhuang County. They went to a nearby wealthy household to change into different outfits. The princess consort was curious about everything along the way. She couldn't stop chattering. Wow, finally, we're somewhere with people. I want to go to an inn, take a proper bath and get some sleep. But Suchan didn't choose to enter the city immediately. Instead, he stopped at a roadside pavilion to sip tea. The princess consort was puzzled, but she didn't dare ask too many questions. She just sat there, lost in her thoughts. What's so good about this tea? It's 1,000 times worse than what I grow. Meanwhile, Suchan kept his attention on the city gate, observing something. Sanhuang County wasn't very large. Its population was under 100,000. Anyone wanting to enter the city was questioned and had to present an official travel permit. Seeing this, Suchan immediately stood up. The princess consort was bewildered. The tea wasn't even finished. Why are we leaving already? Suchan didn't explain at all, just took her to the city gate. Sure enough, they were. Show your official travel permit. The princess consort suddenly got nervous, half shrinking back. She knew she didn't have a permit and couldn't withstand scrutiny. But Suchan smiled and confidently took out an official document. He respectfully handed it over. Yes, I have it. The guard at the gate only gave it a brief glance before returning it and signaling they could enter. The princess consort stayed close to Suchan, blinking her pretty eyes in curiosity. Where did you get a travel permit? She asked. Suchan answered coolly. While you were sleeping, I went out and stole one. Was a thief for once. After he said this, his expression turned somber. He quietly sighed. The situation doesn't look good. Your husband's men know that I'm traveling north alone. The princess consort was puzzled, wondering how Prince Huai's men knew he was heading north. And how did Suchan figure it out? As sharp as she was, she couldn't see the clues at all. Suchan explained, earlier when we were having tea, I observed something. The gate guards paid particular attention to lone adult men. They didn't just check travel permits, they also examined faces. The princess consort was stunned. Examine faces? Then she understood, and in a hushed voice said, they're checking for disguises. Suchan nodded. Not too slow on the uptake, I see. They're definitely not looking for you, because Prince Huai believes you've been captured by the Manchus. There's no way you'd be traveling alone. This also proves that the blood map 3000 Li is no mere rumor. Otherwise, Prince Huai's men wouldn't be so cautious. A short while later, the two of them found an inn in the city. They requested a top-quality room. As soon as Suchan closed the door, the princess consort, who had been obedient and docile all day, suddenly exploded. You're just trying to take advantage of me. You're no different from the lechers in those romance novels, deliberately getting only one room. Suchan sneered. If you'd take off that bracelet, I'd be happy to spend a romantic night with the princess consort, but in your current state? You should look in a mirror first. The princess consort ground her teeth in anger. Fine, then tonight you sleep on the floor. I sleep. If you so much as touch me, you're no better than a beast. Now I'm going to take a bath. Please leave. Suchan waved her off. He turned and walked to the door. I won't be back tonight. You should go to bed early. The princess consort's expression changed slightly. She immediately asked, where are you going? Suchan chuckled and replied, since we're in Sanhuang County, I thought I'd look for some Sanhuang chickens. The princess consort beamed. I'll come too. I want to eat some as well. Suchan rolled his eyes. I'm going to a brothel. You sure you want to come? The princess consort's smile froze, her face quickly flushing. It wasn't clear if she was angry or embarrassed. She slammed the door shut. If you listened closely, you could hear muffled curses inside. Suchan left the inn, then ducked into a nearby alley. He watched the inn for half an hour. But the princess consort never snuck out. This result surprised him. She hadn't tried to escape. Is she out of her mind? This was a golden opportunity. She could have run away, free as a bird, but she stayed. Could it be that she didn't want to give up the title of princess consort, with all its wealth and privilege? From what he had seen over the past few days, she seemed more like a sheltered, spoiled girl, proud and headstrong, but without the cunning of a seasoned schemer. She valued her luxurious life more than her safety. He couldn't understand it. No amount of wealth is worth your life. From the way she mentioned Prince Huai, it was clear she had no affection for her husband. Sometimes, late at night, she would sit there, lost in thought, her mood dark and pessimistic. It seemed she had resigned herself to a fate she couldn't escape. A pitiful woman. Suchan wandered around the city for a long time. Eventually, he stopped in front of a brothel called Yain Lu. The case involving the watchman involved a courtesan at Yain Lu. Her name was Kair. The watchman's case was spread throughout Dafeng, a mix of people from all trades and walks of life. Only then could information be collected comprehensively. Before leaving the capital, the official had given Suchan a list containing contact information, names, and details for various cases in Chujo. As soon as he entered the hall at Yainlu, a seasoned matron approached him. "This way, sir. Please come this way." Her shrewd gaze scanned Suchan from head to toe. His clothes were plain, but his handsome features stood out. Most importantly, his pouch was bulging, clearly a high-quality customer. The matron feigned enthusiasm, but she was actually a bit reserved. "Please, have a seat here and enjoy some tea. I'll pick a few beauties for you." Suchan waved her off and said, "I'm here for Kyer." The matron's smile didn't falter. "Oh dear, you came at a bad time. Kyer has a guest at the moment. Why don't you take a look at the other ladies?" Suchan pulled off his money pouch and tossed it to the matron, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I want Kyer." The matron, swayed by the money, reluctantly led Suchan upstairs. But inside, she was delighted. Rules were nothing compared to silver. They stopped in front of a door. Inside, there were sounds of a man and woman in the middle of an intimate moment, the bed creaking steadily. Suchan didn't bother waiting. He kicked the door open. The noise startled the couple inside. A plump, middle-aged man was lying on top of a dainty and alluring woman. The man turned toward the door with a look of panic, then quickly became furious, roaring, "Get out!" Suchan stepped forward confidently. Playing the role of a jealous and spoiled young master, he grabbed the man and gave him a thorough beating. After taking a few punches and a kick, the man quickly backed down. Brother, let's talk this out." Suchan sneered, "Put your clothes on and get out." The man hurriedly dressed in his inner garments, grabbed his outer coat and trousers, and fled in a panic. The matron, standing at the door, couldn't care less. She put on a bright smile and said, "I won't disturb the two of you. Enjoy your time together. Kyer, take good care of the guest." Then she shut the door. The sound of her footsteps receding soon followed by the creak of her descending the wooden stairs. Kyer's fair shoulders were exposed, her cheeks slightly flushed. Smiling, she said, "What are you waiting for, young master? I've been waiting for you in bed for ages." Now that Suchan was sure there was no abnormality around them, he said calmly, "Stand ready and follow orders." The woman on the bed had looked carefree and flirtatious, but as soon as she heard those 4 words, her expression changed dramatically. She hastily threw off the quilt, climbed off the bed, and knelt down. "1,000 deaths would not be enough to repay you," Suchan said. "Get dressed. I have questions for you." Kyer quickly gathered herself, picked up her dress from the floor, and slipped it on. She then put on her undergarments. In no time, she was dressed properly. She gave a slight bow and said, "Sir, may I see your badge?" Suchan removed his unique badge and placed it on the table. The badge was silver-plated, with an anti-counterfeit pattern for the watchman on the back. On the front, it bore the characters Su. Kyer immediately picked it up for a closer look. She asked in a slightly uncertain tone, "You are Suchan?" "Su-in Luo?" Suchan nodded coolly. "You know me?" Kyer shifted her gaze from the badge to Suchan. Her eyes sparkled with admiration. "Of course I know you. If someone in my line of work, gathering information, didn't know of a young prodigy like you, then I wouldn't be very good at my job. I know all about you. You're the top-ranked watchman in Dafeng, solving cases like a deity. When the capital was in turmoil, it was you who turned quelling the chaos so quickly. I also know you faced down the Buddhist Lohan in the capital. I also heard about you holding back tens of thousands of rebels alone in Yunzhou, becoming a legend." Suchan chuckled wryly. "Really now? Who's been exaggerating my deeds so much that the stories even made it to Beijing? I must look like a laughingstock to any real experts by now." Suchan set that aside and said, "Never mind that. I need to know. Has there been any major warfare in Beijing recently?" Kyer shook her head. "The Manchu have raided the border, but it's only been small cavalry raids. They steal here and there, but there hasn't been any large-scale war. If there had been, civilians would have fled south, passing through Sanhuang County. I definitely know about it." Suchan nodded. "Have you noticed any unusual occurrences in the area, like a large number of people suddenly disappearing?" Kyer frowned, thinking for a moment. "I haven't heard any reports of that, but now that you mention it, I do recall something rather strange." Suchan raised an eyebrow. "What was it?" Kyer quickly responded. "Not long ago, I entertained a client, an older man who owned his own trade caravan. He's been selling goods all over Chujo for years. That time, after drinking too much, he grumbled that Shiko County and 3 of its subordinate counties had been sealed off by soldiers for unknown reasons. The official roads were all blocked, so he had to make the trip for nothing. He said he lost hundreds of taels in food and horse fodder." Suchan tapped the table with his fingers. "Where is Shiko County?" Kyer explained. "Shiko County is on the westernmost edge of Chujo. It borders the territories of the Western region Buddhist nations. Beyond Shiko County, it's all Western territory. That's why it's named Shiko, the Western Pass." Suchan furrowed his brow. Shiko County doesn't border the north. Battles couldn't have reached that far, unless the northern barbarians took a roundabout route, but the western region Buddhist nations wouldn't allow that. So why would Shiko County be sealed off? He nodded calmly and asked, "Do you have anything else to add?" Kaya replied, "I don't know about outside, but the defenses around San Juan County have definitely been reinforced. In the past, you didn't need a travel permit to enter. Now the inspections are extremely strict." Suchan asked, "Is this something new in the past few days?" Kaya shook her head. "No, it started about a month ago." Hearing that, Suchan's brow furrowed. A month ago, San Juan County is on the edge of Chujo. For them to be this strict, are they looking for someone? Trying to trap someone? He thought back to how the officials had been searching deep in the mountains and forests recently. Could they have set up more checkpoints? He reasoned, whoever they're after, it's certainly not me. I'm just overthinking it, but I can't rule out the possibility that I'll end up on their blacklist soon. After all, looking for one person or two, it's all the same to them. Suchan tapped his fingers on the table, analyzing the situation and forming a short-term plan. Tomorrow, I'll head to Shiko County. If something's truly happening there, it might be the site of the blood map 3000 Li case. At that point, it could become dangerous. Should I take the princess consort along? Maybe I can leave her at a safe in near Shiko County. After all, the consort's charm had its uses. She might be valuable to keep around, but I can't let her wander off. As time passed, Suchan finally broke out of his thoughts. "Prepare a pot of tea for me, and replace the bedsheets and blanket." Kaya lit up with joy. "Yes, sir," she replied happily. This meant Suin Luo planned to stay the night here. Kaya's excitement was palpable as she hurried, changed the bedsheets and blanket. After finishing a pot of tea, night had fallen. Suchan, after having his feet washed by Kaya, laid back on the bed, stretching comfortably. Having spent several nights out in the wilderness, the experience had been far from ideal. It had been a long time since he'd enjoyed a soft bed. Kaya sat beside the bed, glowing with joy, and began to undress. "Master Su, allow me to serve you." Lying comfortably on the bed, Suchan watched her. "Kaya, don't you find this bed too soft? It's not very comfortable to sleep on." Kaya smiled. "You're absolutely right, Master Su. I've heard that sleeping on a firmer bed is healthier for the body. A bed that's too soft can make you feel tired." Though she nodded along, inside she was thrilled. If the conversation turned to beds, surely Master Su was quite the charmer. But just as she thought so, Suchan shifted tone. His expression became serious. "So, for the sake of your health, why don't you sleep on the floor tonight while I take the bed?" Kaya's cheerful smile instantly disappeared. What had been a charming, seductive demeanor turned into a look of utter confusion. The next morning, at first light, Suchan washed up and got ready. Under Kaya's lingering, wistful gaze, he left Yinlu. It was early spring now. The weather had turned warm, and by noon it could even feel hot. Gone were the days when one could see clients shivering in the cold morning breeze. Suchan strolled leisurely down the street, heading toward the inn. Suddenly, an armored escort team appeared behind him. Leading the group was not a typical officer, but a man in a black robe wearing a mask. Suchan's gaze briefly settled on the man in the black robe, then casually moved away. As they brushed past each other, a voice called out from behind. "Hold on," said the black-robed man, accompanied by the sound of reins pulling a horse to a stop. Suchan was speechless. Is he really that sharp? He sighed, turned around, and naturally put on a somewhat nervous expression. "Sir," he asked, "were you calling me?" The black-robed man, looking down from his position, examined him. "Who are you? Do you have a travel permit?" Suchan immediately presented his forged identity. He explained his identity and didn't forget to present his travel permit. The black-robed man glanced at it briefly, before asking, "Have you practiced martial arts?" Suchan answered humbly, "I have some talent for martial arts. I reached the peak of body refinement by the age of 19, but cultivating true energy has been difficult. Plus, I've been distracted by women. It's about time for me." The black-robed man said nothing more, returned Suchan's permit, and turned his horse around. He led the troops onward. As Suchan watched the group disappear into the distance, he felt a wave of relief. He had retracted the heaven and earth blade he'd been secretly preparing. The technique allowed him to draw his aura inward, perfectly hiding his true strength. This made it almost impossible for the enemy to discern his actual abilities. That black-robed man truly believed he was just at the peak of body refinement. The downside of the technique was that building up energy without releasing it could be frustrating. It was a discomfort all men could understand. Watching them leave, Suchan pondered. Judging by that outfit, that should be one of the Northern Duke's secret agents. If his agents are here in San Juan County, then they must be searching for someone. Could they be looking for me, or is it someone else? Back at the inn, Suchan had a simple breakfast in the main hall. Before asking the inn, he climbed the stairs to the princess consort's door. Tilting his head, he heard her soft breathing from inside. She was still asleep. Gently, he placed a hand on the door and used a small burst of internal energy to unlatch it. The princess consort lay on her side, her posture proper and dignified. Her face was calm and serene. In that moment, she resembled the noble princess consort she once was. Suchan couldn't help but glance at her a few more times. Not that he had any inappropriate intentions. He simply set the breakfast down, careful not to wake her. He opened the window, letting fresh air flow into the room. Standing by the window, he went over the case in his mind. The blood map 3000 Li case and the princess consort's abduction. There didn't seem to be any real connection between them. Perhaps the Manchu had heard the Northern Duke was about to advance to second rank, so they staged a distraction to draw attention. This would keep the Northern Duke pinned down in Chujo, while they secretly sent someone to ambush and abduct the princess consort. The Northern Duke, as Chujo's overall military commander, had full control over the region's forces. Without an official summons, he couldn't leave for the capital. However, the emperor seemed supportive of his half-brother's advancement. Summoning him back to the capital wouldn't be difficult. Therefore, the Manchu's motivation to invade the border made sense. The blood map 3000 Li case also happened around that time. However, 4 fourth-rank experts and the tribal leader knew nothing about it. What's more, the Deputy General Chu Shanglong was unaware as well. It's possible a powerful Manchu orchestrated it, but the news never leaked. And then there was the mysterious sorcerer. What was he planning? Just as he was pondering how to break the stalemate, the princess consort let out a comfortable yawn, rubbed her eyes, and sat up. Suchan smiled. "You're awake?" The princess consort replied irritably. "How could I not be? The whole place reeks of powder and perfume. Impossible to sleep through it." Suchan ignored her complaint. "Breakfast is on the table," he said casually. Princess consort wasn't done though. She shot back. "Some people, they're going to die on a woman's belly someday." Suchan held his tongue. "You sound like a bitter wife," he thought, but he knew she wasn't upset about him visiting a brothel. What really bothered her was that he had left her alone at the inn all night, forcing her to spend hours in anxious fear. He suggested, "Why don't you rest a bit longer?" In an hour we'll head west to Shiko County. The princess consort responded coolly. "Aren't you going to take care of business first?" Suchan flashed a roguish grin. "All my business is settled at the brothel." The princess consort blushed deeply, then gave him a fierce, indignant glare. In the capital city, called Fangshi, Fuxiang rose lazily from bed. With the help of her maidservants, she washed and dressed. Then she sent everyone out of the room. Fuxiang retrieved a bronze incense burner and a black incense stick from under the bed. She clipped a lock of her hair, twining it around the incense, lit it, and placed it in the burner. Fuxiang set the incense burner respectfully on the table, knelt, and muttered a prayer. The black incense burned quickly, its ashes falling lightly onto the table. As they scattered, they formed a short message. "Matters settled in Beijing. You may return." Upon seeing these words, Fuxiang's expression turned elated. It was the joy of someone finally escaping hardship, but as the excitement faded, a hint of reluctance and longing clouded her gaze. The Great Fang's 13 provinces, most provincial capitals were located at their geographical centers, except for Chujo. It bordered, facing both the Manchu and Demon tribes. Historically, Chujo City had been sacked twice, resulting in 2 bloody massacres. But under the current Northern Duke's governance, the region surrounding Chujo City was peaceful. Manchu riders didn't dare to cause trouble. The area within 100 li of Chujo City was secure. The Northern Duke stationed some of the capital's elite troops there. The Grand Justice side. According to Feng's geographic records, Chujo's walls are inscribed with formations. These walls can withstand attacks from third-rank experts. It's truly impressive to see in person. Most of the major border cities of Great Feng had similar defensive formations. These were regularly maintained by the Celestial Sword Sect. Every 100 years, they would summon all the sorcerers to repair and reinforce them. Censor Liu added, "With the Northern Duke stationed here, Chujo City is as solid as a rock." The administrative commissioner of Chujo, Zhang Xinghuai, came out to greet them. "Everyone, you must be weary from the long journey." Censor Liu approached with a hearty laugh. "Commissioner Zhang, it's been 3 years since we last met in the capital." The commissioner bowed deeply, a subtle smile tugging at his lips. After a brief exchange of pleasantries, he led the group to the largest relay station in Chujo. Censor Liu ventured cautiously, "Commissioner Zhang, His Majesty and the Council were deeply alarmed to hear about the blood map 3000 Li case. They have sent us here to uncover the truth. We hope you can personally assist us." Having already been informed of the matter, Zhang Xinghuai bowed slightly. "How may I assist the honored officials?" he inquired. Yang Yin was straightforward. "I need the deployment records of Chujo's border troops, as well as the official correspondence from various local The commissioner did not respond directly. Instead, he commented casually, "I heard that the lead investigator, Suing Luo, returned to the capital due to injuries." Censor Liu sighed. "He was ambushed on the way." Zhang Xinghuai frowned slightly. Speaking in an official tone, he said, "Without a lead investigator, there is no authority to proceed. Of course, the local office's correspondence can be made available to the officials. However, Troop deployment records can only be authorized by the lead investigator. I will petition the Northern Duke, but I cannot guarantee he will consent. After the discussion, Zhang Xinghuai excused himself, citing official duties. The captain shook his head. What a pity. 2 censors are still just censors. If only they were inspectors. Inspectors hold far greater authority. Censors hold power in the capital, but once dispatched on official inspections, they become inspectors. Inspectors' authority is so vast that they outrank military commanders and provincial commissioners, including those overseeing regional administration and surveillance. It is precisely because of the inspector's immense authority that Suchan was appointed lead investigator. The emperor's intent was clear, to ensure that the mission wouldn't be swayed by the Northern Duke. Yang Yin asked with a flat tone, "What do you make of Commissioner Zhang?" Censor Lu quickly replied, "I'm well acquainted with him. He has an excellent reputation in Qinglian." Outside the city of Sanhuang, in a wayside shelter by the official road, the plain-looking consort and Suchan were sipping mediocre tea. If they were to extract information from the Northern Duke's spies, they definitely couldn't do it in the city. Otherwise, innocent. There was also a risk of retaliation. The best approach was to wait for them to leave the city. Since they were on a search, they likely wouldn't stay long in a small county. There were countless counties in the northern capital region, and it was impossible to have personnel in every city. The spies must be moving around. He just needed to lie in wait. At that moment, he noticed a few men at a nearby table behaving unusually. It became clear that these 3 men weren't ordinary people. Their powerful builds set them apart from the norm. They could hide their aura, but not the physique of martial artists. Moreover, their gazes were very focused, always directed towards Sanhuang City, ignoring everything else around them. They seemed to be waiting for something. Finally, these 3 men bore traces of disguise. Suchan muttered to himself, "A Jianghu vendetta?" These 3 men seemed to have the same idea as him, waiting by the roadside outside the city. He didn't know who they were waiting for. He only knew that their enemy would pass through this road. This world had its own rules. For example, Jianghu was Jianghu. Jianghu youths, Jianghu elders. Officials typically didn't concern themselves with the lives and deaths of Jianghu people, as long as they didn't harm civilians or disrupt order. At this moment, the consort whispered, "Give me a tael of silver. Just a small amount will do." Suchan looked at her and, like stacking copper coins, laid them on the table one by one. The consort extended her small hand, hurriedly collecting the coins, furtively glancing around as she said, "Better safe than sorry." Suchan watched her back and chuckled. "Not bad. After my tutelage, the consort is starting to learn initiative, gaining a bit of experience on the road, and showing herself to be a quick learner." However, she was still like a golden retriever raised in a gilded cage, completely unaware of the struggles of commoners and the state of society. At times, she resembled someone trying to imitate greatness, but instead appearing ridiculous. 10 coins of charity. Yet far from anything that could stir the heart. Suchan's gaze lingered on the great fangs. #1 beauty as she pocketed the coins, then bought a few buns and a pot of tea, and approached 2 beggars. An old beggar accompanied by a young one. She squatted in front of them, distributing the buns and tea. The old beggar looked at her, puzzled, on the young beggar tightening slightly. The consort failed to notice any of this. With a gentle smile, she indicated that these were for them. Perhaps it was her kindness, or maybe their hunger. But the beggars soon lowered their guard. Both were famished, and began devouring the food. Their faces reflected pure gratitude. Suchan watched the scene calmly, his pupils slightly unfocused. But as he looked at that beautiful profile, he seemed moved as well. For once, he didn't mock her or play tricks. In fact, he felt a small sense of pride in her progress. After a while, the consort returned with the tea kettle and cups, her steps light, letting out a sigh of relief, and remarked, "Well, I owe you 10 coins now." Suchan thought to himself, "Is that necessary? Your food, clothes, lodging, all covered by me this entire journey." But all he said aloud was, "What did they say?" The consort's brow furrowed slightly as she replied, "They fled from the border. Their village was destroyed by the barbarians, their family all killed. The old beggar brought his grandson all the way here." Suchan let out a sigh of acknowledgement. After a moment of silence, he joked, "You look beautiful today." The princess snorted disdainfully. She raised her chin proudly. "What nonsense! Is there anyone more beautiful than me in this world?" Suddenly, he clasped his face in distress and rubbed it hard. With a troubled expression, he said, "Even though I look like this now, you'll still be captivated by my beauty." Suchan was truly at a loss for words. Just then, the sound of urgent hoofbeats echoed. A single cavalryman approached from the direction of the 3rd Imperial Line. The rider was draped in a black robe and wore a winter cap. Their face was covered by a mask, leaving only the chin and lips exposed. This was one of the northern border king's spies, the very one Suchan had encountered on the street in the capital. As Suchan prepared to follow with the princess, 3 men at the next table made their move first. Grabbing their weapons, they dashed in the direction of the departing rider. Suchan lowered his head and sipped his tea, silently watching them. These 3 were also after the princess's secret agent. After a quarter of an incense stick's time, he stood and said, "Let's go. I'll show you a good show." But after taking a few steps, Suchan stopped. Looking back at the princess, he said, "You're too slow. Hop on. I'll carry you." The princess instinctively shook her head in refusal. She firmly opposed any intimate contact with men. Any such behavior was something she resolutely rejected. Suchan, always respectful of women, grabbed the princess by the back of her collar and started running at full speed. His footsteps thundered like lightning strikes. With each stride, he leapt dozens of zhang ahead. Deep footprints were left in the official road behind him. The princess, unable to handle the pressure, wailed in pain midair. Suchan turned to look. He saw her features, contorted by the rushing wind. Tears streamed from her eyes. Seeing the first beauty of Dafeng in such an embarrassing state, he found it extremely amusing. After a quarter, the sound of chaotic fighting came from ahead. Suchan stopped. He let go of the princess's collar. The princess hit the ground with a thud. Her face was pale, her pupils unfocused. She was momentarily unable to recover from the speed and intensity. She looked as if she were about to cry, ready to charge at Suchan in anger. Suchan quickly stopped her. "Don't make a fuss." He looked ahead, where, in the distance, a fierce fight was taking place. 3 men were besieging a man in a black robe. Nearby, dozens of corpses and horses lay scattered. The princess, startled, inched closer to Suchan for a sense of security. "That's the prince's secret agent," she whispered. Suchan replied quietly, "It's obvious. This is a targeted ambush." He continued, "These barbarians are ambushing the northern border prince's agent." The princess moved even closer. "What's so great about this commotion? Let's get out of here." Just then, the man in the black robe noticed them and shouted, "It's you. Get back to the 3rd Imperial line quickly. With your speed, you can return in no time." The 3 barbarians turned grim. They too noticed the 2 figures behind them. One of them immediately stepped back, abandoning the attack on the black-robed agent. Instead, he targeted Suchan and the princess, planning to silence them and prevent reinforcements. Suchan cursed inwardly. This scoundrel dragged me into this with just 1 sentence. Yet he didn't take a step back. The princess, however, was terrified, grabbing her head and screaming at the top of her lungs. "It's all your fault," she cried. "What a mess." The black-robed agent smirked coldly. One barbarian was distracted. "With only 2 left, I have a chance." "Sorry, kid," he thought. "When I escape, I'll take care of you later." But as the barbarian's blade swung down, the expected scene of blood and gore didn't materialize. Instead, a crisp cracking sound rang out. The black-robed spy and the 2 barbarian youths, all seasoned fighters, instantly recognized it as the sound of a steel blade snapping. Both sides instinctively paused, briefly glancing toward the source of the sound. What they saw left them dumbfounded. A short distance away stood a man, calm and unshaken. The barbarian who had leapt high and swung his steel blade was now standing on the ground, staring in shock at his broken weapon. The princess of the Buddhist sect raised her head, her face a mix of horror and confusion. Suchan, his expression dark, reached out with his right arm and grabbed the barbarian by the neck. The punishment for a wrong answer is death. The barbarian's eyes filled with fear. In his desperate struggle, his head was crushed in Suchan's grip. All resistance stopped in an instant. The 2 barbarians, attacking the black-robed spy, witnessed their companion's death. They suddenly seemed as weak as grass arrows. In that moment, they recalled the fear once instilled by the Buddhist sect. In silent agreement, one turned north, the other south, and they fled in opposite directions. Suchan dropped the barbarian's corpse. It hit the ground with a resounding thud. He then swung his arms and gave chase. "Stay here and don't move. I'll come back for you after I've taken care of them."